caffeinated. I've only had one cup of coffee so
Now, do the
far.
Warriors have anything to do with that state of mind, or is that just sort of...
It's really all about Jimmy Butler.
I thought it might have been just all about your fifth cup of coffee, and we're not even at 9 o'clock, but go ahead.
Well, no, this is number 2. We're doing okay so far. We're going to try to pace ourselves because that's what the Warriors have to do for the remainder of this season. They have to pace themselves. And it's less about, Dan, the fact that, like I was just looking at championship odds, right? Trying to get the fan base all riled up. And they were plus 6,600 before the trade. They're plus 4,000 now. So that might sound like a pretty drastic improvement. It's still about 3% for those that are wondering.
It's an improvement.
Exactly. It's an improvement. But the question is it going to be enough? And I think there are so many different layers to this.
Wow. Could be here all day.
Well, first of all, like, what was your reaction when you saw the trade? Because I know you and I talked about this summer, that Jimmy Butler, I felt like, was the most realistic star talent that the Warriors could acquire, and it was less about the Dubs than it was Pat Riley just got to get off this guy, and they did. So they moved Jimmy Butler, Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, Dennis Schröder, a top 10 protected first-round pick that has all these different protections. It rolls over next year, unprotected 2027. That goes to Miami. What was your reaction to the deal?
Well, I think you know how I feel about Jimmy Butler, and you can put this in the same category of that of a Paul George, a Lauri Markkanen, a Kevin Durant. I am all about going younger. So with that being said, I was not in on Butler. I'm not in on any free agent in their mid-30s. I think this is a Warrior team that their biggest hurdle was, how do we go young? How do we do that as well as play with Steph Curry as he walks off to the sunset in his final 2 years? That was the conundrum. So getting Jimmy Butler is just something that, again, I'm not just saying that for the sake of this podcast. It's just something I've sort of maintained throughout, and I don't want to change now. I will say, however, if that's the guy that you have in your crosshairs and you really feel as though he's a difference maker, and if you're Dunleavy, if you're Kerr, if you're Lacob, then the Warriors did a good job in terms of who it is that they gave up to get the services of Jimmy Butler. I do have major concerns about the 2-year extension for Jimmy Butler and his 2 bad knees at age 35.
So they essentially add an extra year onto what would have been a player option. And this is, I'm a little bit with you. Like, I guess I was surprised to see them extend him, but the fact that it was only an additional season, and I guess it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, I think that Jimmy Butler was hoping to get to Phoenix because they had a Paul George-like contract waiting for him. So the fact that you don't have to have him for 4 years like the Sixers do with Paul George is a win in my mind. But I also think that it's going to take some time to figure out whatever this new iteration of Warriors basketball looks like. Like, I think that the Warriors went out and traded for someone that isn't just going to be a running mate for Steph Curry, but on a good night, Jimmy Butler is going to be your best player. And from that standpoint, you got more talented, right? Kurt talked about talent over culture. But I do think that there's some concern for me about the fit. And it's not as much about the off-the-court stuff, although that could play a factor for some people. But you lost a good shooter. You lost an on-ball defender. And at age 35, I'm not sure where Jimmy Butler helps you in either of those categories. So I think Jimmy Butler is a better player than Andrew Wiggins. But the fit, to me, is going to take some time to figure out. And time is a luxury the Warriors do not have at this point, standing, a game below 500?
I think they compromised the fit years ago. I think that if this is 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, you've got to fit into what it is that we do, right? The cutting, all the motion offense, everything that it is that Steve Kerr has brought to this basketball team. Knowing where guys are, balancing a floor. But I think when they got Chris Paul, that was the first time they waved the flag like, you know what, we're a little desperate here. We need some leadership. We swung and missed with Jordan Poole. We need Chris Paul. Chris Paul did not fit into what it is that the Golden State Warriors were doing.
No.
That was the first omen that this team was not necessarily heading in another direction, but willing, once again, to compromise. And then we saw it again with Dennis Schröder, who, again, didn't necessarily fit in with his style of play to what it is that the Golden State Warriors like to do. And I think, so to me, that was compromised a couple of years back, or at least a year ago. And now Jimmy Butler coming in, the Warriors' way is no longer as it's not what it once was, in that they're a little bit more flexible. as far as sort of amending things to fit in the style of somebody that they think can improve the team.
I agree with that, but let's take Chris Paul and Dennis Schröder. And I think Jimmy Butler he's an obviously superior player to both of those guys at this stages in their career. Did Chris Paul really help you?
I think so.
I think he did a bit, but he was also sidelined. Like, I think if Chris Paul had been able to play 60 or 70 games, that would have helped you. Jimmy Butler is someone that over his time in Miami has averaged 56 games played per regular season and is known to take regular seasons off. That's one thing. Did Dennis Schröder help you?
I would say that's a wash. I don't think he necessarily hurt you. He didn't help you.
See, I think that there's a consequence to everything. Now, consequences could be good or bad, but the thing about Schröder is, like, there was this guys that it was a low-risk, high-reward type of trade, right? You needed a player. Melton was hurt. You needed to get somebody in here. Schröder was the guy. That's true, and I think Schröder did help them win some basketball games, although I would argue not as many as people are led to believe. The reason why they had to trade for Jimmy Butler instead of a Levine or a trade earlier is because you couldn't move off of Schröder. Like, there was a consequence to the Schröder contract, which was he was only trade eligible as of February 5th. That means they had to stand by. Like, I don't think the Warriors, their first plan was Jimmy Butler. In fact, it may not have even, it might have been Kevin Durant. I think they would have preferred to get Zach LaVine than Jimmy Butler. And I think that someone like Steve Kerr and Steph Curry were reported as such wanting Zach LaVine over Jimmy Butler. Now, they're going to be professionals and they're going to ride this thing out and play as hard as they can and coach as hard as they can. But that was because I think that the Bulls had a deal in place with the Kings only because the Warriors were literally unable to trade for LaVine because they couldn't move off of Schröder. So that's a consequence of that trade. Now, the question is, what is going to be the positive impact, the negative impact of Jimmy Butler? I think there's an argument for both. And I'm curious what people think at 888-957-9570. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone here on Warriors This Week. Like, if I was to ask you, Dan, let's start with the positives. What do you think the positives of this deal can be for the Warriors?
Well, Jimmy Butler can be a very good basketball player. Now, I know you watch the NBA. I do, probably not as much as you, but I keep an eye on the Miami Heat. And I'm just curious if Dub Nation and the fans out there have watched Jimmy Butler play basketball not 2 years ago, not when he dragged a team to the NBA Finals, which was all him, not even when he took that team to the NBA Finals in the bubble against the Los Angeles Lakers, but it's all about the here and now. What is it you're trading for today? And Jimmy Butler this year has just been not very good. Now, again, does that have to do with the fact that he was disgruntled with the fact that he wasn't getting the extension and Pat Riley? Maybe. I know that he can be a good basketball player. And I think the positives is that he fills a lot of gaps. You need somebody who can go out and isolate other than Steph Curry and get to the rim. You need somebody with his intensity, his intelligence, and he's still a very good basketball player when he's dialed in. It's just, to me, about Jimmy Butler, it's all about the money. This idea that he's going to come here and how is this going to work when you're talking about the temperament of him and a Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler? Jimmy Butler is a soldier when you're in that honeymoon. He doesn't have issues with people. He doesn't have issues necessarily with teammates. It's about his money. You mess with his money and you're going to get bad Jimmy. That's been true everywhere he goes. It's not necessarily personal with the team. It's with his contract. So I think knowing that he has the extension, I think you're going to get good Jimmy. My question is, at age 35 and with the two bad knees to go along with your best players who are soon to be 37 and 36 respectively, that just does not work for me. It's just a young man's league, and that's just getting too old.
I think it is a young man's league. I also think it's a league driven by talent, and from that standpoint, I do think the Warriors got more talented. You know, I think they did lose a larger piece of their culture than people understood until maybe the deadline when the stories came out about just how somber the locker room was knowing that Andrew Wiggins was going to be traded. That was something that I underestimated, and I do think that holds impact. But let's stick with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is a winner, number one. And you're right. No matter where he's been the first season or two, that team has won. Now, I don't think that he's the same player that he's been the first 25 games. I think he's better than that. Like, to me, and he talked about this. Well, I'll just play. You can hear from him. He's happy to be playing again. Why?
For myself, I'm so happy to be playing basketball again, honestly. But for an organization like this one, with some hellified talent that we have, I'm glad that I get the opportunity to get here and help get us to winning and do something special. I think that's why I'm here, and I will do my best to do what everybody wants, and that's to win a championship. I'm in it.
Well, that's a pretty big goal. But I will say something else he mentioned was he felt like he was doing cardio in Miami. And for me, watching him play, he just seemed disinterested entirely. So the fact that you're going to get a locked-in Jimmy Butler, whether it's because of money or because he's away from Miami or both, I do think you're going to get the best version of whatever is left in Jimmy Butler. And I think it's good from the standpoint of the Warriors may have identified who their number one can be on given nights. Because from what we've seen over the last, I would say, 10, 12 games, Curry's really struggled when he's being asked to be the sole player. Like, maybe at the beginning of the year, before the bilateral tendonitis, before the thumb injury, he was able to do it. But, I mean, he's shooting below 40% from the floor, around 30% from three over the last 10, 12 games. And you can't continue like that, especially in a game where, like, against the Lakers, Dan, he took 35 shots. That's not the Steph Curry I know, and I think Jimmy Butler is someone that can come in and at least take more off of his plate than a Schröder and even an Andrew Wiggins could.
Yeah, Jimmy Butler is still a good basketball player, and don't get this wrong, I actually like Jimmy Butler, even through all of this with Miami, and even going back to his days in Minnesota. I find him entertaining, and I've listened to him on some podcasts. He's actually he's smart, and he's got a good sense of humor. I like the guy. I didn't necessarily pick a side when it came between him and Pat Riley, but this is what he's always done. He makes no bones about it. He and his agent have always been this way. Don't mess with his money. When it comes to his money, he'll turn into this guy. But when it comes to getting along with players, I know he had that blow up with Udonis Haslem. Remember that? And Spo on the sidelines. In fact, they were playing the Golden State Warriors. I think that was last year or the year before. But typically, he gets along with players. I think that the Warriors get better because when Jimmy Butler's dialed in, he's a good basketball player. Again, the question I have is just it's age, and it's the 35-year-old Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler of a couple of years ago, Steph Curry a couple of years ago, and Draymond Green all younger. Yes, I always say this, I guess before I even give you that quote-unquote take, what is it that we're looking to accomplish with the addition of Jimmy Butler? Butler talked about a championship. Is that where we're at? The Warriors were one player away, and Jimmy Butler was that guy between the Golden State Warriors and winning another title for Steve Kerr, and the Golden State Warriors? Or is it Jimmy Butler can get you into the playoffs? Maybe you steal around. Who the hell knows? Maybe you catch fire and you get to the semis. Hey, it's better for you and I, right? We got something to talk about rather than sitting on our hands. But what is it that the addition of Jimmy Butler, for someone like yourself and or Warrior fans, what do you think that that's going to provide for this team going forward?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I think that I've been really struggling with identifying what the expectation is now because their big three is the oldest in the league. Like, it's Curry, who's about to be 37, Jimmy Butler is 35 going on 36, and Draymond, who's 34. To me, you have to make the playoffs. If you make this move, you move Wiggins, you give up a pick. I realize that it wasn't as big of a haul as people were, as certainly as you would have given up maybe this summer or a year ago for a Jimmy Butler, but you got to make the playoffs. Like you have to. If you don't make the playoffs, or if you get bounced in the play-in like last year, I do think that we're looking at the beginning of a disastrous trade. I'm serious. Like,
well, yeah, no, I think that this is a disaster to begin. I don't want to go there, but I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt. But if they don't get to the playoffs, it's because if they don't make the playoffs, you got him for another 2 years, and guess what? You ain't getting any younger. So, and then you've lost sort of the latitude. I think you did a good job by not, quote unquote, compromising the future and hanging on to the young pieces. Kudos to Mike Dunleavy. There's still some flexibility there, moving people, and you still have, some room when it comes to swapping picks. But you have now just balled and chained yourself to a guy who's 60 per for the next 2 years to go along with 60 mil for Steph Curry. And then another 25 to Draymond Green. That's like 130 mil. You're up against the cap with 3 guys. Want to get to some calls?
Let's do it. Steve, if you have a moment. No worries. Take it easy, Steve, over there. While we give Steve time to wrap up that phone call, 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings with Dan Devone with you. Let's listen to Mike Dunleavy Jr., his decision to trade for Butler at the deadline. Here's Mikey D.
This is never an easy time of year when you have to do some of this stuff and make some of these moves. We're in the business of winning. We made an acquisition of a guy sitting next to me who's one of the best in the league, an elite two-way player, and we are thrilled to have him into the fold. I think this is the type of thing where we got to hit the ground running right away. Not a lot of room for error. We were sitting here at 500, 32 games to go, so it's time to get winning.
Well, it's been time to get winning for some time, Mike. I hate to break it to you. All right, 888-957-9570 is the number. Steve, we could please go to Jan in Mountain View. Jan, you're first up on Warriors this week with Evan and Dan. How are you? Good morning.
Oh, fine. Good morning. I just wanted, I've heard the talk shows throughout the week, and I'll give Butler a chance. But what's been kind of going through my mind is that, he's quit on Miami, he's quit on Minnesota, Philadelphia, and I just wanted to know if there's some acquisition in the or clause in the contract that says, we're giving you this one chance and we're giving you an extension on top of it, but if you turn around and quit on us like the other teams, you're out of the NBA. I mean, you've done this now how many times? And we're counting on you to help out Stephen Curry and the rest of the team and get us over get us to the playoffs. And we don't need to end up with this kind of an acquisition after all we've been through. So, what do you think? Thank you. That's all I had to say.
Appreciate it, Jan. Thanks for the call. I think it's a risky move. You bring in a combustible personality, and I don't care whether Draymond Green's in your locker room or not. Like, Jimmy Butler's an alpha dog. He is a number one personality. He's a number one talent. He's a number one player when he's at his best. There's risk when you bring that kind of player into your locker room. I think no matter what now this could be a situation, Dan, where people like, for example, killed the Mavericks a couple of years ago for bringing in Kyrie Irving. I think at the time he was perceived as toxic, a little bit of a head case, off the court issues. Didn't have to do with money, but he helped the Mavericks get to a finals last year. It could be one of those. It also could be a deal where you bring in a superstar and things don't go the way they want them to, and we're left basically in the same place at the end of the season. The thing that I guess I struggle with is it kind of feels like they kicked the can down the road a bit. Like, you gave him a contract.
I think.
And you paired him with Steph and Draymond. You kept your young pieces, but, I don't really think they I don't think they chose a direction, honestly. I know Mike Dunleavy said we now have a direction, and you and I talked about this 7 days ago, us wanting them to choose a path or a direction. I don't think they did. And I guess that's an issue that I have.
Well, really quick, to Jen's point, I don't know that there's a clause, but it's a good idea. I don't think you can kick him out of the NBA. But now that you mention it, maybe there is something in there for the Warriors specifically that should it get to that point where you start quitting on the team, that we have some outs. I would say this about Jimmy Butler, is that Jimmy Butler, if you don't mess with his money, is a guy that will get along with his teammates. He only goes nuclear when he has contract disputes. Let's not forget, Jen mentioned Philadelphia. She talked about his trip in Miami. When he was with Miami, he dragged, some bums, basically. Caleb Martin and an old Kyle Lowry, to the NBA Finals, man. And when he was with Philadelphia, he was very, very good. They were that one weird, was Kawhi Leonard's little shot from the corner that took like a half an hour to go around the cylinder and finally, ruin Philadelphia's shots of finally getting to the NBA Finals. That sent it into overtime. But he was very good with that team that went deep into the playoffs to the Eastern Conference Finals. And by the way, with that Philadelphia team, he was not the number one. He was not the alpha. That was Joel Embiid's team. So I think at least for a year or two, he can play nice in the sandbox. He can be that guy. I don't have an issue with that. It's always the money. My issue, again, just gets back to the age thing. And to your point, what they've done is they're prolonging, again, the inevitable. At some point, you're going to have to blow this up. Kicking the can down the road is exactly what it is that they did. And we can get into it about, eventually you're going to meet that fork in the road where you're like, we're so damn old and we've rinsed everything out of these three guys and we're still a mediocre to not a very good basketball team, except it's 2027 as opposed to 2024.
What I do like about it is they acquired a teammate for Curry that is the most talented that he's played with since Kevin Durant. I mean, Jimmy Butler is, you're right, his resume speaks for himself. I would even argue in Philadelphia that while he might not have been the most talented player, like he was the leader of that team. The furthest that Joel Embiid has ever gone to the postseason is when he was teammates with Jimmy Butler.
But it was Embiid's team.
Well, Embiid was the best player, but Jimmy Butler is, and that's another part of this too. And I don't know whether you like it or you don't like it. Jimmy Butler is the loudest voice in every room that he steps into. He is the leader in every room that he steps into. Whether it was in Chicago, and Mike Dunleavy knows this. He played with him for 3 years, even though he was much younger. When he got to Minnesota, he got the Timberwolves to the playoffs with the Wiggins, with a cat, with a young baby pup Timberwolves team for the first time since 2004. Then he goes to Philadelphia, helps them get back to the playoffs. They choose Tobias Harris over him, so he goes to Miami. Immediately helps turn that franchise into a winning one for the first time since they got off LeBron James. Like, his resume is he wins, but he does it on his terms. And I just wonder how it's going to mesh with the Warriors, who also don't really seem to have much of a relationship with him. Like, that's another thing, too. That
yeah, I detected that as well.
I don't know if it's good or bad, because, again, you're right. Like, I don't think the issue with Jimmy is ever with the players or the coaching staff. The issue is with the front office. He has quarrels with the general manager or any president that doesn't want to pay him or thinks that he's less than he is. And that was Pat Riley. But, I mean, Kerr doesn't seem to have a relationship with him. Curry doesn't seem to have much of a relationship with him. Even Draymond doesn't really seem to know
him. If you listen to Draymond's podcast last week, he wanted nothing to do with Jimmy Butler. And I don't think he thought, especially when Jimmy Butler said and came out last week that I'm not signing an extension with the Warriors. I think that Draymond felt as though he was in somewhat of a safe place to sort of go around the edges or at least on the fringe of saying, yeah, I don't want this dude on my team. And here he is. I know for a fact you're waiting for those two to butt heads.
Well,
Shocked you talking to me.
Look, it's going to be interesting. That's actually probably the word. That's the word that I've heard used by media members the most to describe this trade. But it's interesting. Yeah. No one can tell me whether it's going to be good or bad because we got to let it play out.
I'll tell you, it's going to be bad.
Well, I know you think it will be. I think it could be fun, to be honest. Before we wrap up and get to our first break on Warriors this week, Evan Giddings and Dan Devone, 888-957-9570 is the number. If you want to text in, call in, please let us know how you feel about the Jimmy Butler era beginning tonight in Chicago, 5 o'clock, Warriors Live and post-game with Mark Grandy. Let's go to Austin in San Francisco. Austin, my man, good morning. How are you?
Happy Saturday, my guys, Evan and Dan. Listen, Dan, Ann can relate to Butler, Evan, because he's a Renaissance man, a little different. I mean, Jimmy's into his exotic coffees and things of that nature. So Dan can relate to that. He's a little different. So I think you guys have a lot more in common, Dan, than you want to admit. But that's cool. I think you said something really cool, though. You said that Jimmy, you wouldn't look at his past transgressions or whatever, or disagreements with management. I totally agree with that. Because listen, to be in the corporate world, just because you leave a company doesn't mean that you're going to be the same where you go, and it also doesn't mean that it should be held against you. So I would never say, we don't know all that what went down in Miami. So I think we have to move on as Warrior fans. Don't get caught up in that. Let's worry about what he's going to do for the Warriors. Now, here's my take, guys, a little different. I actually feel as though Jimmy's addition is very positive, and the reason may be a little different than you guys see it. I see it as more of a changing. They need another set of eyes in that locker room. They need to be shaken up. This is a sub 500 team, and it's nice that everybody got along. And there's all this emotion about guys leaving, but it's a business. These guys know what they signed up for. So this is going to happen. The way it went down may not have been the best, but that's the way the business is. They all know it. So the fact is the Warriors need to be shaken up. They need somebody else in that locker room that can look at what they have, the young guys included. They'll leave you saying, yeah, those guys don't know him, but that's exactly what I want. I don't want somebody that everybody's comfortable with, because the Warriors don't need comfort right now. They need to win. So I'm actually looking to see what Jimmy's impact's going to be, and we know what he can do on the basketball court. He's proven that. He's a pro. But what do we have in that locker room? And I think that's what we got to find out. Everybody thinks they know who the next guy is, and this guy is going to be good. I'm not so sure about all that. And I think that a guy like Jimmy Butler can give you a perspective that you wouldn't have gotten from KD. You certainly wouldn't have gotten from Levine. I would like to have seen them add Vucevic, though. I think they can still get a big that may not be a superstar, but I think that's still an open area for them to go add that big guy. But yeah, guys, I'd be curious to what you guys think about his addition to the locker room, just to kind of shake things up. I'm a big fan of shaking things up, guys. I'll listen. Thanks.
Thanks, Austin. I think it's a really good call. Yeah, I think. Well, the Warriors are obviously in need of a shakeup, but I think what you talked about last week, Dan, was the idea of trying to get younger, which is something they actually did the opposite of, because they traded a 29-year-old for a 35-year-old.
Yeah, and I think that when we're talking about, is this team or the locker room, can it be big enough for the two big personalities that is now Draymond and Jimmy Butler? Well, I told you, sort of tongue-in-cheek, although I do owe you alcohol, that there's a potential that Draymond Green, because anything can happen, could get shipped out of town by Thursday. There's a potential that this could be Jimmy Butler's team going forward.
Yeah.
So the idea that, hey, listen, does Draymond sign off on this guy may not be the narrative, because it could be Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green could be expendable come the offseason. I mean, a lot's going to happen between now and then.
No doubt, no doubt. And we want to continue to talk to you about it as the Jimmy Butler era begins tonight in Chicago. 888-957-9570 is the number. 9 to noon, Warriors this week, every single Saturday on 95.7 The Game. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone. We're back after this.
Safety on the roads and freeways starts at Valvoline Instant Oil.
Martin. He gets it to Jimmy. Everybody clears out. Butler drives up with speed. Pulls it back. Fires another three. Makes another three. Jim E. Buckets. White's hot flame.
Yeah, I got a feeling I'm finna be back in a big way too. So I'm smiling. Like I said, I've been going at it. I've been training. I've been doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. I know that I have my joy back now. I'm in a different situation, different group of guys. I can't wait to get out there and compete. I've had all the family time that I need.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Well, that is the newest Golden State Warriors, Jimmy Butler. The Warrior, Jimmy Butler. He gets traded from the Miami Heat. Andrew Wiggins, Schröder, Anderson, first-round pick, gone. $112 million 2-year extension for Butler before even signing. It's a risk. It's a risky move. I think it has more risk than a lot of people are making it out to be. And I think that, yes, 650, we will expand and explain. But I think, for me, it's less about the locker room dynamic. I think Jimmy Butler is going to fit. I think that players are going to like playing with Jimmy Butler. I think Butler, now that he's paid and taken care of, is going to be, a good soldier. I do wonder about the basketball aspect of things, Dan, because you mentioned something before the break, and it was about how, they could get Vucevic or they could make another move. To me, that would have made this deal make more sense. Yeah. But just from a basketball standpoint, the Warriors have had trouble this year, in my opinion, because they've been old and they haven't been fast enough. They don't play with enough pace. And Jimmy Butler does not help them in either of those categories.
No, and he's not young. And that's my biggest issue. And I don't mean to continue to beat this dead horse. But
you hate us young guys.
No, are you kidding me? I'm all about you. I'm all about you and your future and as a broadcaster and the same thing. And it's hard. It's hard for guys who've been doing it for a while, get older, to make way for new people. But that's, you can't. The Warriors right now, as an aging basketball team, to me, are just prolonging again what I think is going to be an inevitability, which is that you're going to have to rebuild. I don't think that you were one player away from getting back to the Western Conference Finals and or an NBA championship, and I've just maintained that throughout. But I do want to say that there is a level of excitement with Jimmy Butler because he fills a lot of gaps. I mean, Jimmy Butler, when he's dialed in and wants to play basketball, is a very good basketball player, and he, everywhere he has gone, has made teams immediately better. And if he does that with the Warriors and with their veteran leadership, if you really want to look at this glass half full and you're banking, hey, we get into the playoffs, well, the advantage you would have is that Butler knows what the hell it is that he's doing when it comes to the postseason, as is obviously Draymond and Steph. And if you're taking on an OKC, if you're taking on a Houston or even a Memphis, you have the advantage of a team that's been there and done that.
Well, you also have a player that makes your team more watchable. Like, I'm going to be honest, the Warriors have been really difficult to watch. And that's why I like the move, because I cover the team and I got to watch these games, and lucky enough to go to a decent amount of them. Like, I'm looking forward to listening to Jimmy Butler. I'm looking forward to watching him every single night, because watching what this team was before him was woof. I mean, watching them blow leads and struggle to put woof. It's just a it's just a term for, like, oh my God. Like,
break it down for me.
What, woof?
I just recently realized a whip is a car.
Well, it's a word with multiple meanings, but it's more of an expression. Like, me and my friends use woof. You could talk to, maybe it's a meal that you really loved. Woof. Maybe it's a player that you really love watching. Like, that move was woof.
Are we no longer doing fire?
Woof.
Are we no longer doing fire?
Maybe it's a beautiful woman walking down the street. Woof.
Is that fire? Is that out?
Maybe when it comes out of your mouth.
Okay.
No, I don't think fire's all that back in. All right, save us. Alexander's in Chicago, where Jimmy Butler's going to make his debut tonight for the Warriors. Alexander, what's going on, my man? Good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. How you doing? Can y'all hear me clear?
Yes, sir.
Hey, man, you know what? I'm actually doing kind of bad because even though I'm in Chicago and I'm a Chicago native, if I do get Bulls tickets, it would be to the Warriors game. And, like, I dropped the ball this time because the Warriors my favorite team, and they get one of my favorite players in Jimmy Butler, and it would have been making his debut here in Chicago, and I ain't going to be able to be at the game, man. So, yeah, that sucks, man. But intentionally, man, you know, with Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green working out, man, it kind of brings me to the situation with Jordan and Pippen and Dennis Rodman. When they was figuring out, we finding out that Michael Jordan never had any much of a relationship with Scottie Pippen, right? When he was playing, but they still figured out a way to get out there and be dominant and win games. You know what I'm saying? And even, you know, Steve Kerr had his fair share as well. Michael Jordan punked him in the eye at one point. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, I like the energy in the locker room like that. I think it's definitely what the Warriors need. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully it don't come down to that. But I just can't get past, man. We got two dogs in the locker room, man. Jimmy Butler is a gladiator basketball player, man. He gonna come in and he gonna fight to win. You know what I'm saying? So that's what Golden State need right now. You know, that's what they need in the locker room, man. So I think as far as him and Draymond Green working out, I think they'll be just fine. You know, because if I'm Draymond Green, I really ain't. Draymond Green personally shouldn't be trying to do any type of commotion or stop any type of show because, you know, he's just now getting back. He's been doing really well this year as far as staying out of trouble. You know what I'm saying? But he got a $100 million contract, and I'm sure the Warriors can make a lot of use of that come summertime if this Draymond Green thing is not working out with Jimmy Butler. We already know they signed off on Jimmy Butler. They paid him his money. So he going to be there. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just looking forward to the energy. I'm looking forward to the impact, man. And I think the Warriors going to go ahead and get to the playoffs. It shouldn't be hard. Come on, y'all. Win 5 games in a row. Win 4 games in a row.
Hey, before you go,
it's not hard, man.
Did you go to high school in Chicago?
Well, I'm a Illinois native, so I'm like 30 minutes from Chicago.
Gotcha.
So, you know, it's like the Simeons and all of that.
Right, I got you.
I know about them. You know what I'm saying? But I'm like in Naperville right now.
I just want to know who's the true legend out of Chicago at the high school level. Is it Len Bias, Tim Hardaway, or Dwayne Wade?
Derrick Rose.
Oh, man, it's Derrick Rose, brother. It's Derrick Rose. But D. Wade up there, too, though. D. Wade is up there as well. So
thanks for the call, my man.
My area, too.
Appreciate it, Alexander. Have fun watching the game tonight. Well, look, it's not – Jimmy Butler is, I think, a really good basketball player. In fact, I would argue that his career is going to go down as one of the more underrated of his generation because he doesn't have, like, the eye-popping stats. But if you ever watch him play, you can just see that this dude is a baller. Like, he's a stud, and he's got a fantastic story. Junior college kid, 4 years of college after getting to Marquette. You know, I think a second-round pick. Worked his way up with the Bulls, was known as, like, a defensive stopper, and then transformed himself into – like, Jimmy Butler's a stud. I love Jimmy Butler. But the thing about this deal is I also don't know if it's necessarily this is the 3 that they're looking at. Like, I think they could very easily use Jimmy Butler's contract to trade for a max salary slot player this summer. And that's kind of a back door that they've built in for themselves. But I really don't think that they've chose a direction yet. They've more so just, I think, tried to put a Band-Aid over it.
Well, there's more of a direction in the sense that we're going for it right now. And we're trying to appease Steph Curry because the other direction...
What is going for it, though?
Meaning that they're trying to win a title with Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, and Steph Curry. At least that's what they're going to tell the public, the unwashed masses, if you will. I've always felt that the direction, because the other direction they could have gone in is to go backwards, young man, to get into that lottery. I know this isn't popular, but to go ahead and not be good for a year or two. Look at the Boston Celtics, the perfect example. When they realized that their 2 aging stars that took them to an NBA championship, that being Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, were no longer the same basketball players, and they were coming to the same sort of ending like that of the Warriors that are currently faced with this end to a dynasty. What is it that we do? What is it that the Boston Celtics did? They traded 2 very popular players synonymous with that title in Pierce and Kevin Garnett to the Brooklyn Nets. What did they get in return? They got a boatload of first-round draft picks. What did those draft picks turn into? Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. The new iteration of an NBA championship for the Boston Celtics. To me, now I know it's not apple for apple because the Brooklyn Nets at the time had just moved from New Jersey. They were looking for a splash, and they were willing to overpay. But to me, that's the road that I always felt that the Warriors needed to subscribe and go down. The idea of trying to get something out of this never works. And I always say this to people, please show me. I don't want to be that guy to throw water on this. But when's the last time in NBA history that we saw a team in their mid-30s do anything? Or get a free agent in their mid-30s and be good? Please, someone just point out to me where you got a free agent that fit at age 35 and that put a team over the top to win an NBA championship.
To win a championship, no, but the 1997 Rockets did do that.
Okay, we're going back to the 1997.
No, but what you asked last time it happened. I'm trying to tell you the last time it happened.
But I would argue that the league is very different now in 2025.
Well, it is, but Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, and Charles Barkley. They added Barkley from the Suns. I mean, they won 57 games. They got to the Western Conference Finals. Now, that was a little different, I think, because
I want to say Olajuwon as well as Drexler were younger than 35 years of age.
They were, I think all three of them were between 33 and 35. So they were a little bit younger. But in the 90s, I mean,
it's a very different world.
Yeah, I think 33, 34 was pushing it. I mean, Larry Bird retired when he was 34 years old. So that's the example. Yeah. But the next year, they went 500 and got bounced in the first round. The year after that, in 99, which is a strike-shortened season, they got bounced in the first round. So it's...
Since you threw the Houston Rockets...
It's risky.
Nailed me with the right cross. I'm going to go ahead.
No.
NBA.
But to your point, Dan, and again, this is why I don't hate the move, but I struggle to see how it's going to work to the extent that the Warriors have envisioned. It's because that 97 Rockets team... I think Hakeem Olajuwon played like 78 games, and he was their best player. Who is the best player on the Warriors right now with Jimmy Butler, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green? Who's the best player?
Give it to me again.
That Rockets team that won 57 games, Olajuwon was their best player. He played 78 games that year. They won 57. They made it to the Western Conference Finals. Who is the best player in 2025 on the Warriors?
Steph.
I don't know. I don't know if that's the case anymore.
Well, I got to see Jimmy Butler play with the Warriors, but as of right now, I'd say clearly Steph.
I don't think that's good enough. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why they're in the place they are. Yeah. I don't think that is good enough. Steph Curry right now he's still playing extremely well, but he's averaging 23 points on 43% shooting and under 39 from three-point range. That's not Steph.
Yeah.
Him taking 35 shots and 23s is not Steph. And so I think if the Warriors are going to get to where they want to go, if they're going to make a run at this thing, Jimmy Butler might have to be a better player than Steph Curry. And that's a lot to ask, especially for a guy that we haven't seen play much this year. Or just be good.
Just the other thing.
But Andrew Wiggins was just good.
Yeah, and you're right. The other thing we're missing in all of this is Jonathan Kuminga. And Jonathan Kuminga not being available. When he comes back, that's going to be a huge, huge boost to this basketball team because I think he's the one guy that's young, all right? And he's the one guy that's got a high motor. You don't have to worry about load management and back-to-backs. You don't have to worry about the injuries, although he's obviously got the bad wheel right now, but he doesn't have the history of going down with injuries. You'd like to think this is the one-off. But I think him returning is something that we have to keep in mind because that, to me, is going to be an interjection that's really going to propel this basketball team if Jimmy Butler does work out and Butler is able to alleviate some of the double and triple teams that Steph's currently dealing with. And then you bring in a Jonathan Kuminga, another guy that you can't sleep on, and suddenly maybe you got something there. Just to go back, when you nailed me with the right cross, going back to the 1990s.
Yeah, you going to judo move me right now?
With Houston. This is the point I'm trying to make here. So I'm going to take a look at the last couple of NBA champions. The Boston Celtics obviously won it last year. Did they do it with an aging core or getting in a free agent at age 35? No, it was with guys they drafted in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and they finally got into their sweet spot at age 26, 27, 28, and now they're NBA champs. The Denver Nuggets won it the year before that. They drafted the Joker. They drafted Jamal Murray. They drafted Michael Porter Jr. They get into their sweet spot, their prime, 27, 28 years of age. They win an NBA championship. The Golden State Warriors, of course, we know that they drafted their guys. The Milwaukee Bucks won it before them. They drafted Giannis. They get Chris Middleton, who didn't wasn't drafted by them, but was traded, I think, with Detroit. But he was like age 22, 23. But again, the core was set with that basketball team. The outlier might be the Los Angeles Lakers because LeBron was older, but LeBron might be the greatest player of all time. But who was the free agent that they acquired? Or who's the guy that they got in a trade? It was Anthony Davis, very much in his prime. So I think you see what it is that where I'm going with this, that what it is that the Warriors are trying to do, it's just unprecedented. If somebody can give me a template where this has worked before, with 3 stars in their mid-30s, adding another guy with bad knees in their mid-30s, I don't care about the resume. I don't really care what they've done in the rearview mirror. I'm just curious when it's ever happened in the history of the NBA. And, of course, you nailed me with the Houston Rockets of 1997. But
well, I didn't want to bring up the bubble championship, but technically the Lakers added a mid-30s LeBron and won a title. But
that was with Anthony Davis. I would say LeBron wasn't added. LeBron was already there. They added Anthony Davis, and Anthony Davis came on board at age 27, 28.
Yeah, no, he was their best player, but I'm saying if you're talking about a team that's constructed with a mid-30s player, but I think that's, as we've come to find out, LeBron James he's the outlier. He's an exception. He's not the rule. All right, 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings, Dan DeVoe, and Warriors this week alongside our guy, Steven Risotto, Pasta. If you're calling in, be nice to Steve, all right? He's working hard back there. Steve, you could please bring on City Boy. He's in the city. My man, City, what's going on? Good morning.
Where in the city are you from?
What up, E? Like Japantown over there, Western Addition.
Gotcha.
Yeah. What's up, fellas?
Yo.
So, I love this Jimmy Butler deal, but it is a short term. But, his contract lines up with Dre and Steph now, so we get a couple years of this. I do worry that this year is too late in the season, because right now we have to leapfrog a few teams. The play-in is even, in question. I do see San Antonio. I think they got better. I think they're going to maybe go on a run. But I hope not. But I think Jimmy's going to be a good fit here. It's good that it's a short-term thing. I think for 2 years with Jimmy, I think that's about his shelf life. I think it could work great. Steph desperately needs somebody at the end of games that can actually draw some attention. See Steph's efficiency go up. I do feel like his thumb injury has been a big part of, his age. Obviously, look, age is without a question an issue for this team, right? And Dan, to your point, who's done this before? As a Warrior fan and a true believer of Steph Curry, especially, I'm going to tell you, this team has done so many things over the last decade that we've never seen before. All right. Steph Curry has done so many things we've never seen before. So I kind of don't worry about what's happened previously.
Fair enough.
Plus these players, it's crazy what LeBron did the other night, and Steph at his age going for 37. These dudes are in amazing shape in comparison with what we used to see, right? It's night and day. Guys at 37 playing like they're 29, it is pretty wild to see the level these guys are able to play at an advanced age, and so, I'm hopeful for the next 2 years plus this half a season, we're going to at least get some fun basketball to watch. My biggest concern with Jimmy isn't his attitude or him getting along in the locker room. It's more about, his availability and his propensity for sitting games out. I hate that. It's one thing if you're really hurt, but it seems like I heard they were interviewing a guy from Miami radio or something, and he said, Jimmy will call out with a stomach ache, and that's not a good thing. So, so let's hope we don't see any of that. And you mind if I give you a Super Bowl prediction? Because I'm kind of psyched for the game tomorrow. Even though obviously as a Frisco dude, I'm not really into either one of the teams.
Yeah, can they both lose, City?
I know. It's a great matchup, though. I just can't stand either one of them teams. But it's funny being a big Niner fan growing up and still as well now. It makes me think of the Niners a number of times in Super Bowls when the NFC Championship game was really the Super Bowl, and then they would go into the Super Bowl, and it was almost like an exhibition. It was like a celebration of their season, thinking about that Denver game or the San Diego game, and so I think that KC is going to just mop the floor with them. I'm looking at 41-10.
Oh my God!
I think it's going to be, and we haven't seen a blowout in the Super Bowl in a while, I don't believe, and I I think we're going to see a blowout. We're going to see Taylor Swift dancing. We're going to see Kelsey scoring 3 touchdowns, and it's going to be ugly, and it's going to happen because of turnovers. So Spagnuolo's going to get that defense cranked up, and we're going to see some turnovers early, and KC's going to start rolling. They're going to start feeling the energy and the three-peat that we've never seen before in football. Yes, it's a three-peat, and it's going to be ugly, and yeah. So that's what I'm looking for tomorrow.
Risotto, you ready? No one likes us. No one likes us. No one likes us, and we don't care. We're from Philly, effing Philly. No one likes us, and we don't care. Although,
what is going on here?
Let's get back to the Warriors.
I don't know if it's going to be a blowout. Also, because have the Chiefs blown out anybody this season? I know they won 15 games and a couple in the playoffs, but they haven't beaten anybody, I think, by more than double digits in quite some time. Anyways, there's one thing that does rest heavy on my mind, Dan. There is one thing, and I'll tell you about it on the other side, but I do have to get it off my chest.
We got 3 minutes.
No, but it's a good point. I think it's going to open up the conversation. I think it's going to stoke the fire, which is what Jimmy Butler in this trade has done.
So here's something I'd like to get in before we get to the break.
Uh-huh.
And I guess it's sort of defending Jimmy Butler. The harsh reality that is the NBA. And look, we all know these dudes make boatloads of money, and we all want to be NBA basketball players.
By the way, thanks, City.
But when you think about just how somber that locker room was when, Steve Kerr had to call the team off the floor in Utah and basically inform them, listen, Andrew Wiggins is gone. And Dennis Schröder, who just moved his family out of here. He's got kids in school. I don't defend it, but I can understand what it is that Jimmy Butler is doing. I can understand the James Hardens. I can understand sort of what the WNBA is doing. They got a league out right now, this 3-on-3 full court league. I don't know if anybody's following this, but it's all about them. Like, it has nothing to do with, they own the league. And I guess sort of the other side of this is that, the way players are treated, like you tell them, Steve Kerr said, buy in, give everything to this team. And then with like 10 minutes notice, you're told you're no longer living in this city, pack your bags, get the hell out of here. I get it. It's what everybody signs up for. But in a weird way, sort of a roundabout way, I understand where the Jimmy Butlers of the world, where they come from. Like, you know what, man? I'm the reason why people come to this arena. All right? This is about me at the end of the day. Now, maybe he takes it to a different level, to an extreme, but I think that there is sort of, there's both ends of that spectrum. The harsh reality of what it is that we saw in the movement of two very popular, or at least one very popular player in Andrew Wiggins, and then, of course, what it is that Jimmy Butler and some of these other players that we deem as being selfish. I think there's a connective tissue between the two.
No, I actually don't think the off-the-court stuff is my biggest concern about Butler, and that might be contrary to popular belief. I think that Jimmy Butler is going to fit with this team off the court. My biggest concern lies on the court.
You mean schematically?
Yes. I also think that there's something to be said about a hierarchy change with the Warriors. And I'll tell you why. That's kind of the biggest thing that I'm thinking about right now. I'll tell you what it is on the other side, because it has to do with the franchise. It has to do with Steph, and it's been something that's been kind of biting at me for some time. So I'll tell you what it is on the other side. If you want to get in on the Jimmy Butler conversation, phone lines are open. 888-957-9570. That's Dan Devone. My name is Evie Giddings. We're back after this on Warriors This Week.
Meanwhile, at Xfinity.
Hey, Steve, why are you on the roof?
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Oh, it's an exciting time in the Bay Area, specifically for the Golden State Warriors. They acquired Jimmy Butler at the trade deadline. Andrew Wiggins gets moved to Miami. We I think someone brought it up earlier, one of our callers, Dan. They align Butler with Curry and Draymond. All three players are under contract for roughly $150 million combined through 2027. And at the very least, they've put an expiration date on their newest big three.
Does this mean now that they are definitely going to re-up Jonathan Kuminga?
I think it means yes. I also think it means that they are willing to dip back into the tax and maybe even the second apron to keep Kuminga. I don't know how you can not sign him at this point. Now, I think there's an avenue to trading Butler. There's an avenue to signing and trading Kuminga this summer, but he's getting a contract.
So that puts you nearly $200 million. You're up against the cap with four guys.
Like this, no, that is where I will say they chose a path. They chose a path of financial investment because these are the players. Like that's what they had to do. Now, I've been sitting on this for an hour, but it's something I do believe pretty strongly. And I don't know.
Out with it.
Poked around, spoken to a few people. One of the things that gave me pause about the Butler trade, like I don't think there's a massive risk involved, but I could see how it could go spectacularly wrong. My apprehension comes from the fact that I don't think that Steph Curry and Steve Kerr wanted Jimmy Butler. I think the front office wanted Jimmy Butler. And I know that Kerr and Curry are consummate pros and they're going to make it work. Notice I left out Draymond Green. He doesn't matter in my opinion. Curry not having Jimmy Butler as his preferred running mate, that worries me. Because if your franchise is not on board with the big fish, like I think Curry would have been able to wanted to play with Paul George, wanted to play with Markkanen, wanted to play with Durant, certainly. And again, I think he'll make it work, and they'll find a way.
Didn't want to play with Draymond again.
I feel pretty confident saying that Jimmy Butler was not Steph Curry's first choice. And I think that there's a risk now of creating a rift between what the front office wants and what the locker room wants. And it's less about Jimmy Butler to me, Dan, than it is about a growing gap between the players and the front office. And I think there could be problems there.
Okay, a couple of things. And I stole this from, I think I read this with Monty Poole, said this, and this is really insightful, that the last time the Golden State Warriors in the room was divided and that there was a rift between the front office and some of the players and not knowing what it is that they wanted to do and not everybody being on the same page was the year that Klay Thompson tore his Achilles on draft day. And suddenly a guy that was going to be heavily counted upon, the Warriors found themselves once again, quote unquote, in this desperate mode. And they went out and got Kelly Oubre. And the jury was out on that. Apparently, half the room didn't want Kelly Oubre. Half the room was like, we got to do something. Kelly Oubre didn't work out. Didn't even finish the season with him. That was a mistake. A lot of people feel that was analogous to what it is that we're witnessing at the trade deadline 2025. Now, obviously, Jimmy Butler is a much better player than Kelly Oubre, but in terms of this being a desperate act, and to your point, and I have no idea if there's any truth to this, that Steph Curry and Steve Kerr were out on this, certainly has plausibility. I would say this, though. If the GM is making decisions, and you consult, obviously, with Steve Kerr and maybe Curry, but I applaud a GM that's a visionary and does things according to him. I really do. Now, you can say what you want about Nico Harrison, and I know the consensus is, bro, are you drunk? You just traded Luka Doncic at age 25. But what I will appreciate is that you hired me to do a job, and that is to make my respective team better. and I don't give a rip about what anybody else says, including Evan Giddings and Dan Avone, including any of the community pressure, including ESPN or Fox News. I am here as a GM to do one thing, and that is to create a culture that I think is going to work. And that's the only thing that's going to guide me. Now, I think guys like Farhan, and I don't know Dunleavy well enough, could learn from somebody like that. So on one end, I applaud somebody who's willing to do it their way and not necessarily taking the temperature of the room and having it being this sort of collaborative effort. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but it's an interesting scenario should it, that come to fruition as far as, Dunleavy doing one thing and Steve Kerr and Steph Curry being on a completely different page.
You're right about the GMs needing to do what they have to do, but I don't think that this was a move for culture. Like, I think Nico Harrison made that move because he's trying to change the culture in Dallas. And I think there's a path to them succeeding. I think they very well could be successful with Anthony Davis and maybe add this summer a bigger fish and try and give it a go. Still don't think in 10 years we're going to look at it as the right move, but you got to let it play out. I think the Warriors made this move because they were desperate. And I know that everyone publicly is saying that they weren't and that they haven't been emotional.
Oh, Kerr said as much prior to the trade. He's like, we got to do something.
Well, but then he backtracked. That he walked that back because I actually asked him about it on Monday and he jumped me. He said that's not what I said. I swear. That's not what I said. What I said was standing pat is not an option that we're afforded because we're 500. What he meant by that was we're not a team that can say we're good. We have to be open to everything. But he said, I could easily envision us doing nothing. So it was very political. I thought it was funny. But I think the Warriors did something because they were desperate. They were desperate to shake things up. So they did something for the
sake of doing something.
Yes.
And you know what John Wooden said? I told you this last week.
Do not confuse.
Never mistake activity for achievement.
Well, we're going to find out if it achieves something. I just don't think that it's going to achieve enough for people to be happy. Because the other part about this, too, and maybe this is where Jimmy Butler's skin is thicker than other stars around the league, and he didn't really care. Whoever was going to come in and try to save this season or save whatever the remainder of the Curry era is, they're going to get blamed when it doesn't work. Like Curry and maybe Draymond might, but Curry's not going to take any flack for not winning another championship or not getting to, Western Conference Finals. Like, it's going to be Jimmy Butler, or if it would have been Kevin Durant or whoever else they would have brought in here, we would have blamed them. We rarely point the finger at the homegrown star. So I think Jimmy Butler is someone who's equipped to handle that and, quite frankly, just have it roll off his shoulder. 888-957-9570 is the number. Let's go out to North Carolina, talk to our guy, Tim. Tim, what's going on, my man? Good morning. Or good afternoon, not an NC.
What's up? Well, it's just 10 o'clock. No, it's 1 o'clock. You're throwing me off, Evan. But no, man, hey, I agree with you, man. I think it definitely was a front office move. And I think, Evan, and we're at the point now, this has Joe Lacob written all over it. Hey, look, man, I'm giving you $17 million. I'm going to take away some of these comfort pieces with you. I'm going to give you the best talent and go coach them up. I think that's what Joe Lacob is saying to Steve Kerr. We all know, we hear it all the time. He's not a Steve Kerr person. He's not in the Steve Kerr system. And I guarantee you, Joe Lacob is tired of hearing that. Like the old days, the Bill Walshes, the Belichick, hey, give me all the talent, and I'm going to coach him up. And I think that's what he did by he took 4 veteran comfort pieces that Steve Kerr likes, and I'm giving you one player that's talented, and go coach him up. And I think that's kind of what the front office is telling him, man. I'm giving you $17 million. You're the highest paid coach in the league. Go and put a system around this talent and make it happen. And I think I think you're right on the money that this was a heavily front office move. I know you guys trust Slater and you trust Monty Poole, and they pretty much have said that. They've said that this was a front office move, not so much of the locker room. So it'll be interesting to see, but hey, if you are who you say you are, go coach them up and make it happen. Put a system around the talent that you got, and let's see what you can do. And now we'll see if Kerr is up to that, or maybe Kerr isn't, and he'll tap out after his last year. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays, guys.
I got you, Tim. I actually think that, and I think that's a good call. I appreciate it. I think that Kerr is someone that likes a Jimmy Butler type player. He's fiery. He doesn't back down from anybody. Kerr's a lot more competitive than people give him credit for. But this is, again, it's like bringing in a secondary piece or a role piece. It's a lot different than bringing in an alpha dog. Like, again, I think if the Warriors are going to go to where they want to go, which is the postseason, and I think if it's going to be a success, they got to win a playoff series. Jimmy Butler's got to be the best player on this team. And that's a lot to ask, especially at the deadline where you only got, 30 games left in the season? I haven't done the math yet, but you don't have a ton of time left, and you're a game below 500.
Either Jimmy Butler or a couple of other players. But what he does is now he gives you options. So Butler can ISO and be very, very good. And if he's not feeling it, well, then it could be Steph from night to night or depending on the matchups. And if it's not those two, then you hope that Jonathan Kuminga can come back and be a guy that's going 20 to 25 a night. And he has the potential to erupt. What it does now, it's that now you have other opportunities not named Steph Curry. So he doesn't necessarily have to be the best player, but what he's going to do is that he's going to now give the opportunity for other players to shine. Steph Curry can be more Steph Curry. Jonathan Kuminga hopefully can come back and be that shot in the arm. And now your portfolio is a little bit more diversified. Whereas right now it's Steph Curry.
This is from the 510. Warriors are playing chess and everyone else is playing checkers. The Warriors are 3 moves ahead of us. When Giannis comes available, possibly this summer, Butler and Kuminga will be traded. I don't think it could happen. I'm not disregarding that. But the Warriors don't.
I think Giannis could be on the move. That's a good call, but not to the Warriors.
The Warriors are no longer a franchise that gets to say that they're ahead of other franchises. Like they're no longer light years ahead. They're another team.
And they're desperate is what they are.
This wasn't their first choice. Their first choice was Kevin Durant. He told them to kick rocks. And I'm slapping myself for believing all the reports that it could come to fruition. I think it's interesting that all of that stuff was reported when...
Why don't you think he came, Draymond?
No, I don't. I just don't think he wanted to go back to a place... Kevin Durant won 2 championships, 2 finals MVPs, and people still didn't like him. Like, it took him...
he's never beloved anywhere he goes.
You'd think that a multi-time champion would be beloved, or at least appreciated. Honestly, the only reason, Dan, that Kevin Durant is remembered as fondly as he is it because he gave his Achilles.
There's a conspiracy theory that's the underlying reason why he doesn't want to come back. If you were to put on your conspiracy hood,
what
is the way he was misdiagnosed just prior to the finals? He had the calf injury and then was allowed to return, and then obviously snaps the Achilles. That's the reason why a lot of people.
That might be part of it. I mean, if you don't trust a medical staff, but I don't.
Celebrini, man.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, I don't know. Maybe KD does have a rift with Rick, but I don't think that Celebrini is the biggest issue. I don't even think Draymond is.
I do.
Honest,
yeah. To me, it's just I don't like that dude. When you go there with somebody, there's no going back. Like when you dress him down publicly in that game against the Clippers, I'm out. I think he was out immediately when that happened, and then you never go back to that. I think it's because of if Draymond Green was no longer with his basketball team and it was Jimmy Butler and it was Steph Curry, I think he'd at least think about it.
Yeah, well, I thought at the deadline there was going to be a behind the shadows move to try and get Durant and LeBron. That intrigued me. KD at the deadline, LeBron this summer.
Why don't you just bring my mom on board in her bingo card? How old do you want to get? LeBron, Butler.
Did you not just see LeBron the other night?
He was amazing.
Dude, he didn't look 40 years old.
Shooting from the logo.
It's funny. I was at the cafeteria yesterday. There was someone who was talking. He's like, I don't know, that's a drop, but I don't think, I think LeBron's officially past Jordan. It's like, either that happened a long time ago or it never, like his stats are so far beyond anybody else's. and they're never going to be matched. I don't understand how a player is going to play for as long and at that high of a level to ever touch LeBron James.
My big question is now what happens when Bryce comes up? Do we got to go through this again?
What?
Wherever he is, if he's with the Lakers or he's in the NBA.
Put it in the cap. He's going to go to Dallas. Put in the cap.
Okay, so then Dallas has got to take on Bryce and Bronny?
Oh, yeah.
So this is going to be a traveling road show with the kids and dad.
Dude, if they want to get LeBron, just have this. I don't know if this is possible. Can the Santa Cruz Warriors trade for Bronny? Can we bring him to the South Bay? Can we bring him down to the boardwalk? Please.
You know who's going to have the best G League teams forever if you bet on these sort of things? It's just going to be the new dynasty.
The Oklahoma. That's like asking who's going to win the FCS football championship. I don't know.
The Oklahoma Blue.
Oh.
Because Oklahoma City just has draft picks now until 2035, and they can't all play. They'll all be down in that G League just dominating everybody.
Well, you know that's where Dagenham came from, right?
Yeah.
That's why, he was, I think Alex Caruso was on the Oklahoma City Blue when he was the head coach. That's why they wanted to bring him back. So actually, yeah, you're right. Steve Kerr might be gone in a couple of years. You know who's going to fill in for him then? Bring him up from Santa Cruz?
His son?
Nicholas. Dude, could you imagine they replace a Kerr with a Kerr?
Yeah.
I don't know if people would be on board with that. All right, let's go out to, we got some time here. Murillo is in Petaluma. 888-957-9570 is the number. Murillo, good morning. What's going on?
Good morning, guys. All is swell. Thanks for taking my call. The trade, Evan, I'm surprised that you felt that they made a desperate move. I think we both were in the same page that they built this roster with the intention of making this move in the deadline. I don't think they had the intention of rolling in, even with Melton. Forget Schröder. Even with Melton, I don't think they thought this roster was good enough to win it, and they had to kind of trim down the roster with these valuable pieces that they thought would be more valuable at this time. Unfortunately, they went down the hill from the 12-3 start, and I think that started when they started to talk about trades. I felt like all these guys, they felt like the pond was shrinking and they didn't know who was leaving. So I think it was one of the reasons why the Warriors were playing so poorly. Now, the trade kind of grew in me, Evan, because I think of all the options that the Warriors had, forget LeBron and Durant, that would never happen. I think after 2022, Durant would never come back here. Just ego, I don't think he would ever make that choice. And I think the trade grew in me because of the options we had. Levine, Vucevic, Ingram, Cam Johnson. They might help, but when you talk about the playoffs and you talk about your opponent, what is the opponent thinking about? All right, Steph is coming with Levine. Okay. With Vucevic. All right. The opponents don't respect that. Now, if you say they're coming with Jimmy Butler, and one thing about Jimmy that I like is I like guys that can play and have character. And I think Jimmy's character is going to kind of bring it would take the Warriors out of this comfort zone that they had with Wiggins. And you know what I mean? I think a shakeup is needed. And like you said, it's going to force Steve to open his deck and see if he can, mix Jimmy with the second lineup here and see what we can do when Steph is off the court. So I think that the trade grew on me because of what we gave up. It wasn't much. I don't think Schröder fit. I think him leaving would give more time for Podziemski, and Kyle and Lindy, these guys leaving would give more time to Moody, who's playing well. So I don't know. I think the trade grew on me. I hope they get another guy on the buyout here, see what we can fill up the roster with. But yeah, I like what they did. I think it will pay off.
Murillo, real quick. Do you think Jimmy fits? You mentioned Schröder not fitting. Do you think Jimmy fits?
I think he fits because I think Jimmy is more of a flexible player than people give credit to. I think he can play with different guys. I don't think he's this ball stopper. I think I've seen Miami playing different ways with him. So in the Philadelphia, I think he had success in a lot of stops. And I think one thing that people don't give Jimmy the credit to is he's a ball junkie. All he does is play basketball and promote his brand. He's a Neymar camp guy, so they promote themselves. But I
I like the character. I think the opponent would think a little higher of the Warriors, given that we make a run here and sneak into the playoffs. But I think it also officializes this staff timeline. I think it's 2 years of let's see what we can do. I hope they can keep coming. It's going to be tough, but we'll see. I think if they're healthy, I think you can put a 7 to 8 lineup there for the playoffs. Hopefully we get there. That I think it's a lot more. It strikes more fear in the opponent than Levine or these guys that don't move the needle. I think Jimmy can.
Yeah.
I think he can make that difference. Now it's not Durant, but I don't think we would get Durant at all. And the Lakers is a lot more appealing to LeBron than any other team right now with Lopez.
Appreciate him, Murillo. Hold on. Sorry. I'm kind of with him, by the way, Devon. I guess my thing with the fit is that Jimmy Butler has always been able to fit with other players. But I think that, Jimmy Butler's coming into this position.
What do you
he's looking at it like it, what? I think he's looking at it like it's his team.
No.
Like it's his team, and the Warriors are going to have to figure out how to fit with Jimmy.
I don't think that's an issue. Again, he went to Philadelphia, and it was Embiid's team.
I disagree.
That was Embiid's basketball team. And those guys...
Being the best player...
J.J. Redick was on that basketball team. They had some veterans. He wasn't... And he meshed in well. I don't think he's that kind of guy. I don't. I don't think it's... If you take care of his money, he'll play nice. He's fine. He has an issue with the front office when you start messing with his extensions and or his currency. And that's it. I don't think he has an issue. He's not going to... I know a lot of people think that he's going to have an issue. You think he and Draymond are just going to come to fisticuffs?
No. It's not him not playing nice. It's the fact that wherever he's gone, he's been the alpha. And I just think it takes time when you bring in an alpha for the rest of the team to adjust to him.
But remember what Austin said?
Yeah.
Just to get back to that call, I think it's a good point. Is that the Warriors could use a bit of a shakeup. I mean, this idea that it's Draymond's team, because Steph is a quiet leader. It's his team. But if you're going to be loud and good, he can work with you. He's fine with it. But I think the idea that this is Draymond's team and that you've got to play defense, you got to do it Draymond's way. Listen, if Jimmy comes in there and is better than Draymond and Draymond continues to age, I think the narrative is going to be that Draymond is now expendable. And during the offseason, who knows? Luka Doncic just got traded. Anything can happen. This could be Jimmy Butler's team should it work out in terms of the seasoned veteran that is the loudest guy in the room replacing Draymond Green.
Well, I think no. I think you're right, but that's kind of my point. I think Jimmy's coming in here, and not in a militaristic manner, but this is any locker room he walks into, it's his. It is, and people are going to have to figure out how to work around him as opposed to him coming in and figure out how to working around the Warriors. At least that's the way that I read Butler. If you disagree, I'm happy to talk about it. 888-957-9570 is the number. We also got some other trades around the league that I know Devon's got some thoughts on, and I really want to get into that as well. Again, 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings, Dan Devone, back after this on 95.7 The Game.
You know what? Let's throw a party this year for the big game.
Hey, we can invite our friends over, and all take turns yelling at the TV during...
Wants to shoot it, gets locked up, feeds Moody to Post. Post for three, it's on the way. Got another one. Post with a three ball. He has a skill set that if you can add some pounds to him in the offseason, he could be a player in this league for a while.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Oh, Tim Roy, I love you, bud.
He'll be on the call tonight at 5 o'clock when Jimmy Butler, well, he's supposed to make his debut. According to Anthony Slater, was not seen at shoot-around. So might still be going through some physical processes. But Andrew Wiggins sent a goodbye message to the Golden State Warriors faithful on Instagram, the following: "Thank you for unforgettable years. It has been an absolute honor to wear this jersey, represent this organization, and compete alongside such an incredible group of teammates and coaches. From the moment I arrived, I felt embraced by the Bay Area and the entire Warriors family, and that support has meant the world to me. Winning a championship in 2022 and growing both on and off the court in this environment is something I will always cherish." I got to tell you, when the Warriors traded for, and this is what has me feeling optimistic, say, about Jimmy Butler. I think it's a bit different. But when the Warriors traded for Andrew Wiggins, he did not have a very good reputation. In fact, the Wolves had to attach a first-round pick that later became Kuminga in order to get off of him. And 5 years later, a lot of people would tell you that Andrew Wiggins is one of the more beloved recent Dubs. And it's just interesting how a player can completely turn their career around. Wiggins went from, I think, not a bust, but maybe a player that didn't live up to the hype, to an NBA champion that was a critical piece to a title team.
Yeah, two guys with two completely different reputations, though.
Wiggins and Butler?
Yeah. I think Wiggins' he was a bit of an enigma. I think his personality gets misinterpreted for not caring. I think he's one of the most genuinely nice guys in the NBA. One thing that I have a hard time with is just like all the chirping, and everybody has to complain about every single call. You ever see that guy get into a ref's face? I mean, he was just really sort of a spiritual, walk to the beat of his own drummer, and I think a lot of us sort of misdiagnosed him, including the Minnesota T-Wolves. But he did disappear for times. I mean, he's just that sort of guy. Like, he would be low energy for a stretch of 7 to 10 games. And then he'd be Andrew Wiggins that led you to a championship in 2022, that got every rebound, was a force in the paint, hitting three-pointers. But I don't think, like, his reputation is very different from what it is that we're about to embark on with Jimmy Butler.
No, but my point is, I think when Wiggins left or was traded from Minnesota, he was a misunderstood player. And even the last couple of seasons, because of off-the-court misfortunes, I think he was misunderstood. He's a player that I think I respect just like as a kind of a fellow introvert, but I think Andrew Wiggins is a guy that I do think there's going to be some residue from him being traded. And I don't, like, the Warriors got better. There's no doubt about that. Jimmy Butler's a better player than Andrew Wiggins is, even though Wiggins might fit more. But he leaves a pretty big void in that locker room. Like, I think that Wiggins, to your point, Dan, was beloved by his teammates, and that's going to take some time to get over. And I know that feelings and emotions don't win games all the time, but I do think there will be an impact from Wiggins leaving, and it's more from the young guys. Like, what the Warriors did, you may think this is a stretch, but I'm going to go for it. What the Warriors did is they traded the bridge between generations, between Curry and Draymond, who were 15-year vets, basically, and the pups who are trying to figure out their place in the NBA and on the Golden State Warriors. I think the bridge between the generations was Andrew Wiggins. And he's a guy that, along with Schröder and even Slow-Mo to some extent, like, those guys have seen everything in the NBA. With all due respect, Steph Curry and Draymond Green have lived in basketball nirvana for the majority of their careers. They've been solo team players, they've won championships, and they've been a big part of that. But that's not how the NBA goes. Generally, you're traded, like Andrew Wiggins happened to be on draft night. Generally, you play for multiple teams. Your contract value goes up and down. Your value as a player goes up and down. And so having someone like Andrew Wiggins in that locker room, to me, was a great resource for someone like Kuminga or Moody or even Podziemski, the younger players, to have someone to talk to about what generally happens in the NBA, which is you getting jockeyed back and forth in your role and thinking about what your future is going to be. And that player is no longer in the locker room. I think there's going to be some residual from that.
I don't know if he's in a bridge as much as he was just a really good player this year. That's what's going to be missed. He was a godsend. Can you imagine what this team would be as bad as they have been without Andrew Wiggins or the Andrew Wiggins of the last 2 years? He's everything that Steve Kerr forecasted. That this guy's coming in the best shape of his life. He's refocused. Remember, all of us, especially you, out on the young man Andrew Wiggins. A lot of us were like...
Well, the Warriors were trying to trade him for the last 2 years.
And with good reason. Good reason. I think that physically... I think we're underrating him a little bit. Are we really that sure that Jimmy Butler's an upgrade?
I think he is.
The Andrew Wiggins we have seen again. Yes, if you were to put the two resumes side by side, Jimmy Butler's a better basketball player, no doubt about it. Right now, Andrew Wiggins has done everything and then some. Without him now, you're asking Jimmy Butler. Again, I just don't know what version of Jimmy Butler. I'm with you that I think that Jimmy Butler just wasn't bought in this year. But the Jimmy Butler I saw this year in limited action with Miami and towards the end of last year, let's not forget how he ended things last year. You know what created this whole riff was last year in the playoffs, which he wasn't playing in, where he'd say, we'd have won this series if I was playing. And Pat Riley was like, well, shut the hell up because you're not playing. And that was the beginning and the end of those two.
Well, I think it was more so they didn't want to give $120 million to a 35-year-old. Like Jimmy Butler's on a contract through his age 37 season. That's just something that as a good basketball mind that Pat Riley is, he doesn't want to be attached to. The Miami Heat got better in this trade. Like, I don't know if they won it because Butler, I think, is a better basketball player than Wiggins, but they were going to be starting Haywood Highsmith. Like, the Miami Heat basically traded a player that was a malcontent for an NBA champion who was a number 2 player on a title team. They got better. I think the Warriors and why Wiggins was important is because he was someone that eventually got to the point where he could assimilate to what the Warriors were. He was never their best player, but he could be their number 1 scorer on given nights. He could be their best defender on given nights. Andrew Wiggins assimilated to the Warriors. I think the Warriors are going to have to assimilate to Jimmy Butler. And that's a really, I think people are overestimating how difficult of a thing that's going to be.
I can't see Steph Curry and or Draymond Green assimilating to anybody at this stage.
Then I think we're going to be in trouble.
Here we go.
I'm
Buckle
serious.
up.
Well, no, but it's not, again, it's not just about Jimmy. It's like, and again, to a lesser extent, Schröder. I told you this the moment they traded for him. Trading for a player that doesn't fit the system is not all of a sudden going to, like, Draymond told us that this guy didn't fit. And again, Jimmy Butler is a way better player, and it's a lot different. But to me, getting players that don't fit doesn't just change the equation. Like, by the end of the season, we might be talking about the same thing, just in a different way, which is this team has got a bunch of aging players that are too old or past their prime, and a lot of young guys that aren't proven enough that don't have enough experience. What they did was widen the gap. Like, you mentioned those teams, the Celtics, the Nuggets. Yes, they have their homegrown talent. They also have players in their 20s. Yeah. They have players in their late 20s. The Warriors just traded a 29-year-old for a 36-year-old. 2 summers ago, they traded a 23-year-old for a 38-year-old. Getting older, as good as Jimmy Butler is, to me, is not going to automatically propel you into playoff contention. That's why I do think that there's risk to this. Because unless you make the playoffs, and to me, unless you win a playoff series, what are we looking at the next 2 years? That's what I'm thinking about.
What are the prime years for an NBA basketball player? And you know this. It's 28 to 30, right? That's
yeah.
Last year,
Roughly.
Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, both like 27, 28. The year before that, the Denver Nuggets, the Joker, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., also all in their late 20s. The Warriors had 2 guys, as I like to say, in the sweet spot. It was Andrew Wiggins, and it was Kevon Looney. And I would say Kevon Looney with his medical history plays much more like a guy who's, 45 as opposed to now 30. And now you don't have anybody. So it's sort of feast or famine. So now you have the Pajemskis and the Moody's and the Jonathan Kumingas and the Trace Jackson Davises of the world sort of still groping and trying to find their way in their early 20s. And then you have, the old men, so to speak. And you lost that key guy who was in the sweet zone, that being Andrew Wiggins, who's now a member of the Miami Heat.
Yeah, and again, I think that this is going to take some time to figure out. But again, the Warriors are 25 and 26. It's not as if they're bringing Jimmy Butler into a situation where he's supposed to be the guy that's going to get them over the hump. Jimmy Butler was brought in to help save this season. That's also not an easy thing to do. I know Jimmy Butler, I really like Jimmy Butler, and he has provided, I think, some of the more underrated playoff performances in recent memory.
In the bubble, he was amazing.
Well, the bubble, he was awesome. 2 years ago, he was awesome. He had a 56-point performance against the Milwaukee Bucks. He largely did drag that team to 2 finals that no one expected the Miami Heat to get to. There's no doubt that Jimmy Butler is going to be remembered, I think, as a damn good basketball player. But how much he has left, that's the biggest question. Because if he doesn't have enough to be, I think, the best player over the last 31 games of this season, then the Warriors are in trouble. And beyond next season, Jimmy Butler is a player that, again, in his time in Miami, averaged 56.5 games in the regular season played. He takes regular seasons off. Now, it's because he's getting himself ready to lead a team in the postseason. But the Warriors' issue hasn't, I think, been the playoffs. It's been getting there. Like, they got to get through 82 games before you can think about a play-in or a 7-game playoff series.
And health becomes a huge issue, as it has been with him and Steph.
And Draymond.
I mean, again, every time I think about aging players that were put together, how many times this year has the big three out there in Philadelphia, and Paul George, Joel Embiid, and Therese Maxey play together? It's like less than 10. And I always hearken back to, again, it's just, I don't want to be that guy, but somebody just has to point out to me when something like this, a template like this, if this is the recipe to win, when has it ever worked in the NBA? Now, I like one of the callers was bold enough to say, hey, look, Steph is one of one, so you don't necessarily need a template, or you don't need necessarily something that you can point out and saying, well, this team did it back in whatever year. It's just, they're going to be the first. Well, I'm certainly open to that. But it's hard in today's NBA. If you look at who actually won on draft, who actually got better on draft day? The one team that actually got better was OKC, because Chet Holmgren came back. Like, that's the one team that added a player and actually got even better. And that's just where the world is at when it comes to the NBA. It's about young teams that are headed in one direction, and the Golden State Warriors that I think are headed back down the mountain. At some point, you're going to have to push reset. At some point, you're going to have to come to the realization that Steph, Draymond, and now throw Jimmy Butler into that pool can no longer do it because they're pushing 40 years of age. And then what?
And then you got to turn the page. I think also the fact that they got Butler.
Why not get out in front of that was my whole point.
Because you still want to be entertaining. Like, that's another thing.
I get it. That makes sense.
Look, I'm not trying to say they got worse at the deadline, but Butler's a good player. But to me, this was as much about just trying to shake things up as it was trying to get better. Like, it's trying to be more entertaining. They're trying to be... The Warriors are an entertainment product right now. They're not a good basketball team. And they'll have 30 games to prove that they are. But what I'm afraid is that we're going to be stuck now with these 3 guys, and there isn't going to be a whole lot of flexibility. I don't know. Maybe the one thing they did do, which is interesting, is they did open up a max level slot for this summer because they could move Butler. But it seems to me, Dan, that this is also them.
Well, you still have your young pieces.
Well, yeah, but how much are those young pieces worth?
And you still have, you didn't mortgage the future because of the youth that you retained, and also your draft pick. So there is some flexibility. It could be a lot worse, let's put it that way.
That's true.
I'm surprised. Well, actually, I'm not, because you and I talked about this, that Jonathan Kuminga wasn't mentioned in that deal. I don't know how they pulled it off without Jonathan Kuminga.
Well, he was going to be in the Phoenix deal. That was also reported afterwards by Shams, that the deal for Kevin Durant would have been multiple first-round picks. Wiggins, Kuminga, and filler. So Kuminga would have been going to the Suns.
Well, and maybe I mentioned this, that I'd never felt as though he would go to Miami, simply because he is not Heat culture. Whatever it is that Pat Riley, at now age 80, say what you will about the guy, Jonathan Kuminga, who I think is a good basketball player, and this isn't somebody's right or wrong, he is not a Pat Riley type of hooper. And I knew from going back in the day, I was like, well, if Jonathan Kuminga is your biggest trade asset, don't knock on the Miami Heat door, because they want nothing to do with a guy like that. And they pulled it off regardless. So kudos to Dunleavy and company.
Yeah, and the Heat got a pick. I mean, all right, I know you hate doing this. If you're going to grade the trade, what grade would you give it?
Well, keeping in mind that I wanted nothing to do with Jimmy Butler and want to get younger,
okay,
I would give that a B+.
B+. Okay, I would say like B-. It's not a bad trade, but I also think that they are still they're not a Jimmy Butler away.
No,
they're. I don't know. I mean, maybe people think that Butler's going to be the difference between them. Their current path was towards missing the playoffs, and I think Butler is going to help them get to a play-in game. And maybe he ends up being the difference in said play-in game to get to the postseason. But I just think it's going to be really difficult. Like looking at the Western Conference, top 4 seeds, OKC, Memphis, Denver, Houston, they all relatively stood pat at the deadline. They didn't do much. Is Jimmy Butler going to help you upset more than you already were any of those 4 teams? I would argue Houston. I think they could beat Houston. They're not beating OKC. I don't think they're beating Denver. And Memphis, even at full strength, I think they're going to have a really hard time with. Like the Warriors, Kerr's talked a lot about it the last few weeks. It's like they want to play, they got to try and play faster. They got to try and play with pace. And they got to defend better. You know, is Jimmy Butler as good of an on-ball defender as Andrew Wiggins? I think he used to be. I'm not sure if he is anymore. He certainly is not a player that's going to help you play with more speed. You know, to me, where Jimmy Butler is going to help you the most is in crunch time. It's in those 2-minute scenarios like we saw against Utah, where that's a game that he helps you close. But I don't know, Dan. I guess my glass is a little half empty, and it's weird because during the summer I was someone who was really interested in Jimmy Butler. I think he's awesome, but
he is just not with this team.
Maybe that's it.
You talked about some of those teams, Houston. Oh, we can take a look at it. Memphis, the Nuggets, Rockets, Lakers, T-Wolves, Clippers, Mavericks, Suns, Kings, all in front of the Golden State Warriors. Some of those teams might have been a Jimmy Butler player away. Maybe the Nuggets could have used it. Memphis, Houston, give me the veteran to go along with some of our kids. But the Warriors with an already aging core, I hope I'm wrong. I really do.
No, look, I'm interested. That's
going to be fun.
That's what this trade does.
It's given us.
That's what this trade does. They make the Warriors watchable. This will make the Warriors watchable for the last 30 games, and it's going to make them more entertaining. I think it's going to be a whole hell of a lot more interesting to cover from a media perspective. You know, what is the ceiling to you now of this basketball team with Jimmy Butler compared to before?
Win a playoff round.
I think that would be a success. For them to get to a second round series would be a success.
Oh, it'd be huge. And they may not want to admit as much, but I think they'd all take that.
But I almost feel like that's not good enough for some people.
Oh, well, some people are delusional.
Like people think that Jimmy Butler is going to help drag them to a Western Conference Finals or a final.
Hey, stranger things have happened. I mean, Luka Doncic got traded this past week. Who the hell knows?
By the way, you don't think that's as bad of a move as other people, it sounds like.
Oh, well, I like Nico Harrison for doing it, but the fact that he traded Luka Doncic is ridiculous. You don't trade that guy.
What if he's 25 going on 35?
Nah.
He's been playing basketball since he's 14, Dan. He's got a lot more miles on those legs than people know.
No. How do the Lakers do this, though?
They're the Lakers. That's why. They had a player, like...
I've been doing this since I've been on this planet. Doing this since the 60s. Wilt Chamberlain, they got in a trade. Kareem, they got in a trade.
I know, and those players wanted to go there. This is actually where I do think that this trade is not going to be looked at as unfavorably in the future. Like, do you think Luka Doncic is an all-time player? Because that's who he's now compared to. In Dallas, and I actually think this is kind of why Nico had maybe reasons to move him. In Dallas, you can get a bit fat catty. Like, you're not compared to Kareem, to Elgin, to Magic, to LeBron, to Kobe, to Shaq. You're compared to Dirk. You're compared to Nowitzki, who helped win this franchise's first championship. So you can kind of be the guy who keeps your team in contention, but there's not really an expectation of delivering rings. The moment you go to the Lakers, you're expected to not just win, but you got to win championships. And if you're going to be a single name guy, like I just mentioned all those players before, or even Mikan you could throw in there, Chamberlain, all these stars.
Mikan.
I'm just saying, man.
The first 7-footer.
The Minneapolis Lakers. Yes. You got to deliver. And I don't know if Luka's up for that.
Well, I think to your point, we continue the conversation after the break. Yeah, there aren't the expectations in Dallas. You know why? Because they don't have the history of winning, because they don't get the great players like that of the Los Angeles Lakers. But they did have one in Luka Doncic. And how did they get Luka Doncic? Well, it was one of those things. It was like the stars were aligned. For some reason, Vlade Divac had an issue with Luka Doncic's old man, and Sacramento was out, and then the Atlanta Hawks have no idea what the hell they're doing. So he lands with Dallas. You got a generational player, because it's not a destination for free agents, right? Somehow, some way, you got what could be one of the greatest players in the history of this league. When it's all said and done with, you don't trade that dude away, because you don't get players like that. LA does. New York, maybe even the Warriors. They got Kevin Durant in his prime. Guys don't go to Dallas like that. Generational players don't end up in Dallas. And you had one. You stumbled on this guy, and you just dealt him.
LeBron might go there this summer.
What's that all about, bro?
I don't know, man. But anyway, the NBA is back. I mean, they own Super Bowl week.
Yeah,
we saw Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, De'Aaron Fox, Jimmy Butler, to a lesser extent, Zach LaVine.
No one likes us. No one likes us.
Well, you got to stop singing the Phillies song before we get to the part you can't talk about. Yeah, Devon. Devon.
I got a Devon and a DeBone. Who's some guy went after me.
Bad to the DeBone.
By the way, I'm not saying Jonathan Kuminga is a bad player. I'm just saying I don't think Pat Riley, I think, was out on him.
Well, I didn't know they were going to get Butler, but I did tell you that Kuminga was going nowhere at the deadline. And also Draymond Green, so that's a White Russian. The drink, there was someone last week who was confusing White Russians for something else. We got one more hour left on Warriors this week, 11 to noon. Get your calls in, 888-957-9570. If we're missing something, please let us know. I want to hear from you. Also, text in, same number, 888-957-9570. That's Dan DeVoe. My name is Evie Giddings. We're back after this. Warriors this week, 95.7 The Game.
And Devon.
Hey, let's throw a party this year for the big game.
Oh, great idea. But first...
All right, this is Warriors This Week. 1 hour left. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone trying to break this Jimmy Butler trade down from all angles. Micro, macro. Appreciate everybody
Let's get
that's
Jimmy on the
in.
horn. It's Jimmy. When do you call in? Let's talk to Jimmy.
Jimmy Butler's, he's now become the best interview. Although
he's always been a good guy, though. Well, I shouldn't say a good guy. I like him. I've always found him sort of like, if I was in the NBA, I'd probably hang out with that dude.
Well, that's why I hope he's bringing some coffee with him. Although he sells it for an exorbitant price. I mean, Jimmy Butler's, he's all about his bread, which I respect. I do think that, I'm looking forward to the first press conference at home. It actually does suck, the timing of the trade, because the Warriors are amidst, I think, a 2 home game and 13 game stretch. The next time they're at home is later this month on the 23rd, or right before it. They play Charlotte, and then Iguodala's jersey retirement will be on Saturday. I think it's the 23rd. But we don't really actually get to see Jimmy at home, which is kind of tough. What I'm looking forward to seeing the most, hopefully if he plays tonight, there are other players that have to pass physicals. Jimmy wasn't a shoot-around, still expected right now to play. I just want to see how, if he is really that alpha on the floor from the start, because I think he's someone that is going to need the ball, is someone that can play with anybody. But, again, you're bringing in a 1. I think the Warriors understood that. They were trying to get the most talented player they could, the best player they could at the deadline. And when the Durant thing fell through, I don't know, maybe LaVine came off the board. I think Jimmy's better than LaVine, but he became plan B.
Let's do a best case, worst case scenario.
Okay.
We'll start with the best case scenario, and I'll start with you.
I think the best case scenario for this season is
not necessarily for the season, but just he's on the floor tonight. Best case of how it is that he immerses with this basketball team, and then you can take it as to how far they go in the postseason if you want.
They make the playoffs all 3 years that he's here. I think that's the best case scenario.
But I wanted you to dive into the minutia. Just tell me, how does it work with him on the floor? Best case scenario.
How it works with him on the floor is you're able to keep, in an ideal world, you keep your defense at a high enough level. Kuminga comes back and gives you more of a scoring punch off the bench. Because that's another thing too. I don't think there's room for Kuminga to start over Draymond or Jimmy. I think you're going to have not similar issues to the Wiggins-Kuminga pairing, but maybe some. To me,
why can't he slide back to the 4?
Who, Jimmy?
No, Kuminga.
Well, because Draymond's starting.
We'll put Draymond at the 5.
You got it. You don't have a lot of shooting on the floor.
No, I know,
but I think that you're much better half court offense with Jimmy on the team. Maybe even than Wiggins, because Jimmy's a shot creator. That's something the Warriors have not had. So you now have 2 shot creators on the floor with Curry and Butler, and you're a more efficient offense. You have someone that can help you in the 2 categories which you really struggle, which are layups and free throws, and you're able to win close games. I think that's how it looks to me. The best case scenario with Jimmy.
I would agree. I think he covers a lot of areas of need. I think he's an ISO guy that can take you from the wing. He'll go get his on his own. He's going to alleviate pressure from Steph. He unlocks Steph. Steph becomes Steph again. He re-energizes his team with his hustle, because that's what he does. So I think it was Duncan Robinson was talking about this, and he was asked recently on his podcast, who, by the way, he's taken over the JJ Redick podcast. It's the old man and the 3 and Duncan Robinson now. And so Duncan Robinson was asked.
He's a placeholder until Redick gets fired. Although maybe he's got tenure now with Doncic, his old teammate.
So here he is talking about, Duncan Robinson's talking about, he's talking about Jimmy Butler, and he says, well, think about it. He doesn't really shoot a 3. He doesn't necessarily cross you over and have this amazing first step to the hoop. It's not about his quickness. He does have a good mid-range game. It's not about his rebounding. It's all this dude is just outworks, desire, hustle. It's like 85% attitude with this guy. That's what separates him from everybody else and why he's as good, if not at times as great as he is. And I think that could be infectious on a basketball team that, again, to get back to an earlier caller's point, could use the proverbial kick in the butt right now and a shakeup where it's just Draymond's world right now. Well, move over. There's another sheriff in town, and that could work. And I think that in the best case scenario, he provides an energy that's clearly lacking, and then physically he's able to go ISO. He unlocks Steph, and then it works with Jonathan Kuminga, who's another guy that can come in and go ISO and get his own. And suddenly the Warriors, just like anything else in the NBA, begin to play beyond their skis because they have a level of confidence. And should this team get into the postseason, the one thing we do know is that their season and that their experience, and that they could handle someone like that of a Houston or a Memphis or even OKC in a 7-game series. Best case scenario. Now, worst case.
Yeah, so again, best case scenario, I think they get to the playoffs this year, they win a series, and they get to the postseason for the remainder of like the Dre, Curry, Butler trio.
Well, okay, best case.
Of their era.
What's the furthest they're going?
The furthest that they go, I don't see them being able to win multiple playoff series against top seeds. I just don't.
So best case scenario, you don't even have them going to the Western Conference Finals.
No, I think it'd be the semis.
That's pretty telling. Okay.
Well, you just asked me. I'm telling you.
No, I think it's yeah, it's telling.
Okay, for worst case scenario, I actually don't think it's going to blow up like the Miami thing did, and Jimmy's going to wreck the locker. I don't think that happens. What I think happens is we realize that this is just a different version of the same thing. That it's still about a 500 basketball team. It's a fringe play.
Becomes toxic. We do know that Jimmy Butler can be that guy. And that's the worst case scenario, that this team is not good. They miss the playoffs and they're old. And it becomes one of the worst trades, maybe right up there with, they traded Robert Parrish once to the Boston Celtics that set that legendary front court. It could be right up there with that, because if it doesn't work, it's not as though you can say, okay, it didn't work, let's move on. No, you've just committed yourself to $60 million per to a guy at age 35 with 2 bad knees. So
you're talking about Jimmy or Steph?
Take your pick.
Just saying, one of them's literally got bilateral.
Interchangeable at this point.
Tendinitis. All right, let's open up the phone lines. 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone with you on Warriors this week. Let's go to Kevin in San Francisco, who's got a thought on the trade. Kev, what's going on, my man? How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for taking my call. I was just a little confused because it seemed to me what the Warriors sort of need to do is get a young big. And how the Lakers were able to get Mark Williams even after they got Doncic. And I mean, for me, if I were the Warriors, I would have thought, they've got Doncic now. Maybe we can get Goddard from Dallas, or maybe we can, get a guy like Williams or a guy from the Pacers, maybe for Kuminga, and keep maybe keep Wiggins. And it just doesn't make it sounds like desperation. It sounds like they're just trying to salvage this particular season and not really looking forward here about what they're going to really need to do. I can't see any way they can compete with some of the better teams with young bigs, the Clevelands or the obviously Denver or OKC. I mean, they're just not going to be able to do it.
Appreciate it, Kevin. Well,
we'll get into it.
No, if you want to talk about it, we can do it now. I have
the
my
rest
thoughts.
of the calls.
All right.
I'll destroy you over Mark Williams.
No, you won't. No, you won't. No, you will not. The Warriors, he's right, though. They didn't really get that much bigger. Again, it's like, I don't know if they addressed the biggest issues with the roster. I mean, they got more talented, which you could argue is a problem. But they didn't get faster. They didn't get younger. They didn't get better shooting.
Oh, we can do Mark Williams now.
Okay, let's do it. You love the Mark Williams trade, and I'll tell you why you're wrong whenever you're done.
No, go ahead. You tell me what's wrong with Mark Williams, who, by the way, is 7'1" center who went to the Los Angeles Lakers for Dalton Connect. And how many picks did they give up?
I think an unprotected first and an additional pick. I don't know if it was a second or someone else's, but they gave up like a good young piece in Connect, and at least one unprotected first.
Yeah.
Like they gave up more draft capital than they did for Luka Doncic, which I thought was funny. But how many people out there have actually watched Mark Williams play basketball?
True.
Like, let's be honest. I watch an occasional Charlotte game here and there. Like last night, I thought the game against, I've been watching more of the Spurs, so they played the Spurs. I think Charlotte actually won that game. But who has actually seen Mark Williams play? Number one, because he's been marooned in the Queen City. And number two, Dan, he's played 38% of games since he's entered the league.
Bad foot, bad back.
What I think that Mark Williams is like the new version of DeAndre Ayton.
Oh, God.
No, but you remember how many people loved DeAndre Ayton when he was 22 or 23 years old?
He was the number one pick.
Yeah.
Out of the University of Arizona.
Because he was offensively gifted, and he had feathery touch. And then you realize...
By the way, he's having a renaissance in Portland.
No. Portland's having a renaissance in spite.
No, but he's played much better. I know they have bigs that have surpassed
Klingham's better than him already, I think. But DeAndre Ayton doesn't play a lick of defense, neither does Mark Williams. Just because you're 7 feet tall doesn't mean you can defend and you block shots.
Here's the reason. Are you done?
Yeah, fine. Go for it. I don't think it's as big of a fleece as people are making it out to be.
Here's the reason why. Again, it gets back to GMs where you have to be able to take a risk, roll the dice, and have a vision.
You just love the pups.
I do. You're right. And I do remember this guy when he was at Duke. All right? And I don't think he was a one and done at Duke. When you're just watch this dude run up and down the floor and then watch Quentin Post run up and down the floor. Like you recognize an athlete. When you're 22 years old and you have a high motor like that, a guy that can be in the dunker spot. Now listen, does he have some warts? Yes. Now, medically, you got to vet him out and make sure that this guy's good to go. And they signed off on him that his foot and his back are good. But actually, I tell you what, I'll play a game with you.
Okay. I love games.
So there's a couple of go-tos that I have when it comes to the NBA, one of which is Kevin O'Connor. And I was reading him. He's now with Yahoo, used to be the Ringer.
Yep.
And so Kevin O'Connor was talking about how Charlotte fans were going after him. Because he said on the trade deadline that Charlotte pointed out that this big guy that was just traded for is absolutely somebody that's just dog meat, all right? Overrated. Anybody else, to your point, who's actually seen him play, the Charlotte fans were saying, you're just watching the highlights. We see this guy play on the nightly, and there's a lot of dog in him. There is no defense in this guy. He is a waste of time. We have watched it over the last 2 years. Those are the Charlotte fans.
Mm-hmm.
And they should know better than anybody. Would you agree?
I would hope.
They were talking about P.J. Washington of a year ago. Kevin O'Connor wrote a piece about how that trade for P.J. Washington was a steal. My point is that when you're in that culture of someplace like Charlotte, a losing culture where you don't know any better, but you're a big who's got upside, who can run, he got those shoulders, and he's got a wingspan longer than that, or as long as Wembanyama.
Oh, I know.
You still can't block shots.
He still doesn't use it.
But if you're in that losing culture, this is why GMs, like a Rob Pelinka, who I thought is just teaching a master's class, sometimes you got to roll the dice that that's the guy that everybody's overlooking. I'm willing to bet, much like that Sam Darnold out there with the Jets in Carolina, that he's in a losing environment. And with LeBron and the Los Angeles Lakers, we're gonna set this dude straight, and we just got our big to go along with Luka for the next 10 years.
No, it's a move for the future, and it can help them this season. There's no doubt about it. But moving from a losing to a winning franchise is not going to change you playing 35% of games. It's not all of a sudden going to turn your foot into a titanium appendage. You're not all of a sudden going to play 75 games a year. The issue is not talent with Mark Williams. And I think he's a good player. What, you sent me the stat that he's the fourth most efficient offensive player in basketball or something like that. And he very may well be. But it doesn't change the fact that also, for example, the P.J. Washington trade, and this is where, like the Warriors, to me, they at the deadline were looking for the piece, not a piece. P.J. Washington was a piece. He wasn't someone that had to come in and be the number 1, number 2, or even some nights number 3 option for the Dallas Mavericks. So that's where he helped them. Mark Williams, for example, has to be one of the pieces of now and later for the Lakers. I think that's a lot to ask. Jimmy Butler is expected to come in for the Warriors and be the piece. That's a lot to ask. And I think of all the players that were traded outside of, Doncic and maybe Fox, Butler's more equipped than anybody to handle that. But even De'Aaron Fox is not the number 1 in San Antonio. That's Wembanyama. Zach LaVine might not have to be the number 1 in Sacramento. Jimmy Butler, I think, is being, of all the guys that were traded, Jimmy Butler is going to be asked to do the most of any piece that was acquired at the deadline. And he's 35 years of age. I'm not saying that it can't work. I'm just saying that's a lot to ask. And
by the way, San Antonio, I think, just got over on everybody.
Yeah, they did. They did. They didn't have to give up anything.
Zach Collins.
By the way, I know they're in Sacramento, and I was actually excited at first. It just goes to show you that not all first-round picks are created equal. When I saw that De'Aaron Fox was traded for 3 first-round picks, I saw, and they got LaVine. That's a decent deal. And then you start to do some digging, and you see that the only pick they have this year, I think, is top 14 protected. They're not going to get it because Charlotte stinks. They got the Spurs 2027 first-round pick. Which
Vucevic did go to the Kings.
What?
Nikola Vucevic did go to the Kings.
Oh, well, I'm saying in the deal though, in the Fox deal, Vucevic, did he end up going to Sacramento in that deal? I thought it was just LaVine.
Yeah, he went to Sacramento, right? Yeah, Vucevic is with the Kings.
Oh, I'm just talking about the deal.
Yeah. But I thought we were talking during the break. That was like, yeah, Vucevic is now in Sacramento.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I think if the Warriors had been able to get Vucevic, that would have made the Butler deal make a lot more sense.
Sacramento, look at least on paper.
Yeah, well, they're always good on paper.
Sabonis, DeRozan, Vucevic. I mean, look at some boys.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They have some boys, but
LaVine, left out LaVine, Sabonis, Vucevic, DeRozan. It's a lot of talent.
It is a lot of talent. They just became the Sacramento Bulls. Like 6 games under 500. Like being the Bulls is not.
What is Sacramento? I mean,
what is Chicago doing?
What the hell did they get
Nothing.
for LaVine?
They
didn't even get a starter. Herter?
Well, he has started. I don't think he's very good, but he has started. He has hurt.
The Red Menace?
His team. What do they call him? Red Velvet?
Red Velvet.
Red Velvet. No, look, what are the Bulls doing? I don't know. They kept their best player, though. Kobe White. That's a guy I would have wanted if I was the Warriors. By the way, yeah, I don't think Vucevic left. I think he's still in Chicago.
Why do I want to say he was traded to the Kings?
I don't know why you want to say that. Maybe he almost was. But LaVine's in Sacramento. Alex Len.
What did the Bulls trade for Vucevic?
Just got bought out because he went to Washington, I think.
Okay.
Valanciunas moved. Locales. There was a lot of smaller sort of deals on the periphery. There was a lot of action at the deadline. Like compared to last year especially, I think the biggest name that was moved was Siakam. This year is like, God, I mean, and it does set up a summer. I think that'll be interesting for the Warriors because to me also, you're not making this Jimmy Butler deal if you don't think that he can be competitive next year.
DeAndre Hunter.
DeAndre Hunter's good.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about bold.
Well, I don't know if it's bold.
Well, Cleveland has got the best record in the East.
I think they also ducked the tax by making that deal too because they got off of LeVert and Niang.
Not only was it done for money, but I think that's an upgrade.
Yeah, I agree. Their starting 3 was like Dean Wade or maybe it was Okoro on some nights. I mean, I still don't think they have enough to beat Boston in a 7-game series, but they're going to be good.
You always sleep on the Knicks. I don't know. Well, go ahead.
All right. I know that you split time between the coasts, but quit selling me on the Knicks. They don't play defense, even though they have all these players that are supposedly good defenders.
They got a player just as good as Podziemski, if not better, named Tyler Kolek.
Oh, they got a lot of players better than Podziemski.
Well, I mean, a left-hander that's just in his second year. You know this guy, Tyler Kolek? He has 2 feet that are not the same size.
Sounds like an operation. What?
He has 2 feet. He's a guard for the New York Knicks. He's a left-handed. He's their version of Podziemski.
Oh, that's trouble.
He has 2 feet he has like a size 12 and a size 10. Like his left foot is size like 13 and his right foot's like a size 11 and a half.
How do you know that?
I was reading this in the Post.
Big tabloids guy. No, the Knicks are good, but I don't know, man. I just don't think they have enough. Even though they got a lot of talent.
I think what's scary out in the
They're
West.
just going to run them into the ground. Jimmy Butler knows better than anybody.
Yeah, that's right. Those two actually got along for a couple of years. And again, the riff was not with Tibbs. And that infamous pickup game, remember that?
Oh, yeah.
In Minnesota?
Well, that's actually something I think, like Wiggins gets unfairly grouped into that young Timberwolves core that Jimmy Butler couldn't stand, supposedly. He just didn't like Cat. Like, he didn't like Karl Anthony Towns. He thought he was soft, which has been not proven incorrect. I think Cat improved his standing around the league a lot last year with the Wolves and has definitely helped the Knicks. But no, Butler loved Wiggins. I think vice versa.
It's interesting that you mentioned Karl Anthony Towns and the guy that he was traded for.
The Kings got Jonas Valanciunas. That might be who you're thinking of.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Not Vucevic, Valanciunas.
Thanks, Joe. 818.
The trade that brought Randall, right? Julius Randle.
Mm-hmm.
Just think about that. One player who, and DiVincenzo hasn't been the same, but one player that just, to get back to sort of your point, if Jimmy Butler doesn't fit in, he's the alpha, it just doesn't work, how it can disrupt. Now, Minnesota was a much better team than that of the Warriors because they went to the Western Conference Finals a year ago. But my point is that one trade and one player disrupts everything in terms of harmony, in terms of what it is you did a year ago. It's all out of sorts because Randall just did not fit into the fabric of the way Minnesota's doing. And now Minnesota is ready to blow it up all over again. There's talk that Ant-Man could be out. I mean, it's a joke out there in Minnesota for a team that came out of nowhere, but they moved this one piece in trying to get better. And a lot of it had to do with the money. Karl Anthony Towns for Julius Randle. And Julius Randle has just become this disruptive force that has set that franchise in the rear. So, again, if we were to revisit worst case scenarios with Jimmy Butler, it could be something like that of what it is Minnesota's had to deal with this year.
I guess I wouldn't be as worried about that happening. By the way, you know the Wolves, why they've been playing better?
Why?
Because Randall's been out. Naz Reid has had to start for them, who's probably the better fit anyways. But Randall was never expected to come in and be the best player on that team. It was always going to be Anthony Edwards' team. And while I don't know, maybe people can use my words. I'm not saying that it is now Jimmy Butler's team. It will always be Curry's team. But I think if the Warriors are to change the course that they've charted, which has been about 500 with Curry as your best player, Jimmy Butler's got to be better than him if you're really going to make a wholesale run. If, for example, the Warriors right now are 25 and 26. They're tied for the 10 seed. They are 3.5 games out of the 6, right? If they are to get to the 6, they got to jump 5 teams. Woof. I think that they got to get to like 45, 46 wins, and that might be generous. That means you got to go 20, and if they got 31 games left, 20 and 11 or 21 and 10. That's really good. That's a great stretch of basketball over the course of like 2 months. And I think if they're going to do that, and I'm not stripping them of that possibility, to me, Jimmy Butler has to be the catalyst. Because when Curry this year has been, and he hasn't had help, but I don't know. Like I don't think that Curry just continuing to lead this team and taking 20 to 25 shots a game is going to get them to a 21-10 record over 30 games.
Even if he's not drawing the sort of attention that he's currently dealing with because Jimmy Butler's.
Well, I think if anything, we got to go. Sorry, we got to hit a break here. I think if anything, and I'll tell you why on the other side, I think Jimmy's going to love playing with Curry. All right, 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone back after this, 95.7 The Game.
You know what? Let's throw a party this year for the big game.
Hey, we can invite our friends over.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Oh,
I might have to bust out a little Michael Jackson and start moonwalking on Thursday night.
Next Thursday?
Yeah. This Thursday.
We're going out.
This Thursday.
Yeah, I told you. I finally did some homework.
Let's go.
All-Star weekend.
Might actually leave the city.
Dude.
How quick of a flight is it to Alameda?
You can leave your passport at home, all right? We can go to the other side of the bridge. It's not... Like, they speak the same language in the East Bay. I just want you to know this.
Are you driving out there? Maybe I'll just roll with you.
Yeah, just pull up. I got a spot for you. There's no Fernet. They generally leave that here in the city. But it's a fun time. I'll show you around. Show you around the island of Alameda. Show you around Oakland.
I don't want to see any of that. I just want to go to the party and to an open bar.
Dude, if you're my guest in the East Bay, I got to take you around. All right? I got to show you all the spots. Don't worry. There's like 4 of them. We'll be in and out. But no, I can't do it.
Come on, I want to hear your declaration. Are you talking about the Warriors?
No. Do you think the Warriors got better at the deadline? I think so.
Yeah, I do.
Do you think they got good enough to hold off your San Antonio Spurs?
Well, I think San Antonio really improved themselves. I really do. So, I don't know if you guys watch this Stephon Castle, but this guy is a budding star. He's a rookie.
Misses him. UConn. They stink.
They're not good this year.
Well, they're not going to.
Well, it's another team. Portland, you got to keep an eye on.
You got to stop with the Trailblazers. I know they're playing well. I know
they're kind of like
well.
Utah of a year ago. It's like, wait, what are we doing here? Why are we winning now? We're in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. What's going on here?
They kind of remind me of what the Rockets were at the end of last season. Where they won like 10 in a row, but Şengün was hurt. And they basically just beat teams by trying to run you out of the gym because they're so young and dumb and don't really know any better. I think the Spurs are the problem next season. I don't know. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for Fox to figure out how to play. Also, because I think last night was his first game. They lost, but he's the 2. Like, he's playing alongside Chris Paul.
He won his first game against Atlanta, and he was huge. He was like 10 of 14 from the floor. It was gigantic. It doesn't fit in now, and this gets back to my point of like it just doesn't work when you turn the corner and you're young. It just sort of stands out in a bad way. It's now, and they haven't been bad for this team this year, but all of a sudden, Chris Paul and Harrison are just, they don't fit. Now that one guy joined that team and De'Aaron Fox, now suddenly it's like, yeah, Chris, bro, he shouldn't be starting anymore.
Well, I think they're stopgaps.
Well, they were all along, but now it's just more clear once you see Fox going downhill and Wembanyama just running with them and Keldon Johnson and Vassell and all these boys. It's just like, yeah, that's what you want, man. Guys are just high energy, and then here comes Chris Paul, slow, plodding. It's just, that's the Warriors, right? They're void of that. Like, that's where you want to be. That's when we talk about the direction you want to take, that's the direction you want to lean in.
Well, and that's why I think the Warriors, well, their young guys are going to be important. I do feel confident in saying that because I don't think that Butler, Curry, and Draymond are going to stay healthy for, let's say they got 31 games left. I think they're all 3 going to be able to play in hopefully 25 of them.
How many of those do they play together?
Well, that's what I'm hoping. If you could get
25?
That's optimistic. If you could get 25 games with those 3 on the floor together, that to me is best case scenario. So when Kuminga comes back, he's going to have to play a big role because he's going to be for Butler. He's going to be in for Draymond. I think he's going to have to play big minutes no matter what off the bench anyways. Moody, that's a player that I wonder how Butler sort of affects him because it seems like he plays best when he's a forward now. And I also wonder how the Warriors are going to be able to overcome. I know that Wiggins isn't like a sniper, but he was shooting 38% from 3 this season, and they traded him for a player that does not shoot threes all that well.
No.
So I think that there's a path for them staying at the same level defensively, and they've been around a top 10 group this year. And ideally, Butler helps you in the half court and what your offense can produce, because that's one thing that I think has been the most difficult part to watch about this Warriors team is when they do settle into a half-court set. I mean, they struggle to get good looks, and even when they do, it feels like Buddy Hield's bricking an open three.
You touched on something that I wanted to explore. Defense wins championships, right? That's sort of what the Dallas Mavericks live by. Like, that's why they got rid of Luka
They also
Doncic.
might die by it too, but sure.
And defense is, like, you threw out the 97 Houston Rockets, and I was like, hey, listen, it's a different NBA these days. Do you still think that the emphasis on defense is what it once was, even just a couple of years ago? I'm willing to say defense doesn't win you titles anymore.
I disagree with that.
The Boston Celtics were good defensively, but they outscored you, is what it is that they did a year ago. They shot threes better than anybody. It was all about the offense. The Dallas Mavericks last year lost to the Boston Celtics. It wasn't because of defense. It wasn't because of Luka and Kyrie Irving don't play defense. It's the fact that they needed another shooter. They needed offense in order to beat Boston. And that's why they went out and got Klay Thompson.
Well, then why did they just trade maybe the best offensive player in the league?
That's for another conversation. That's my point.
Yeah.
Is that this idea that defense, I understand the importance of defense. I'm beginning to think after what it is that Boston did and the way the NBA is trending these days, that we're overrating defense in today's association.
I don't know if we're overrating it. I think look, defense is always going to be important. I mean, show me a team that was a bottom half defense that won a championship. But you're right that you do need firepower. And I think that's probably the biggest difference between the Warriors now and when they won the title. It's like, you know, they were the best defense by defensive rating in basketball in 2022. They were like 17th in offense. So they won with defense, but they had enough scoring to get it done. This year, it's like they're a pretty good defensive group, but they've been abysmal the last month and a half offensively. And I think Jimmy Butler can absolutely help them there. But I wouldn't go as far as to say defense is overrated, because I think that if you look at the best teams, OKC, yeah, they score a lot, but they're the number one defense in basketball by far, and they just got better with a two-way player coming back in Chet. Cleveland is a really good offense, but what hasn't changed about them is their defensive identity. You know, those two bigs, Allen and Mobley, are really difficult to score on. Boston, yes, they get up a lot of threes, but they're switchable 1 through 5. So you're right. Like, you need to score at a higher level. I mean, offensive rating and per possession keeps going up and up and up. But at the end of the day, in the postseason, I think you got to be able to guard your man.
Like, a lot of people think the biggest concern with the Los Angeles Lakers now is defense, because you lost Anthony Davis. Who's going to defend?
And Max Christie, who's probably your best perimeter defender.
And now you just got Luka Doncic. LeBron doesn't defend nearly as well as he once did. Reeves is not a good defender. They got nobody defensively. I'm still willing to bet they're going to be a better basketball team. Look at the Dallas Mavericks.
I can see that.
A year ago. Didn't really have any defender yet. Now you got AD, but I think we've become so offensive-minded. I think we've become so three-centric that defense isn't what it once was as far as its level of importance for you to win.
No, you're right. I mean, the three ball is the most important shot in basketball, right? You got to be able to get them up. You got to be able to hit them at a high clip. And the Warriors, I think, have shown us that. It's like that's the one thing they have been able to do well this year is shoot the three, because they can't get anything inside the three-point line. This is interesting from the 925. I told my friends at the beginning of the year I did not see the Warriors going anywhere, but all I wanted was for them to be fun to watch. They have not been fun to watch. Now I'm really hopeful that has changed. I do think they will be more fun to watch, and it's because Curry finally does have a partner. Now, I think that if they're going to be good this year, that Butler's got to be the Batman, and maybe Curry's a co-Batman. I don't know. Maybe he's Nightwing instead of Robin or whatever you make him out to be. But the 408 says Curry and Jimmy B, now the best 1-2 duo in the West since Curry and KD. I wouldn't go that far, but Devone, where do you think that 1-2 punch, the Warriors duo now, ranks in the West among 1-2 punches?
Wow. I have to see it unfold. I have no idea how this is going to materialize. I really don't.
Curry didn't even have one of those before, I think, which was the biggest issue for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, Clay. Are you talking?
No, I'm saying like this season.
Yeah.
This season. It was just him and Pods. Him and Wiggins.
I mean, again, you think that Jimmy Butler has to be a number one. Steph is always going to be your guy. Steph is always going to be your best player. He just has to be really good. He has to be Jimmy Butler. And then Jonathan Kuminga has to be really good when he comes back. You don't necessarily have to be the best player on the team. Just be Jimmy Butler. Just be good. And it's still going to go through Steph. If it's clutch time and we need a bucket, it's clear side for Steph, or let him just do his thing. And if he doesn't have that crease or a step back, he'll find Jimmy Butler. But this is still going to be, I think it's still going to be his team. Jimmy Butler just has to be really, really good. If Jimmy Butler's really good, again, that just opens a lot more, that just gives you a lot more avenues and a lot more opportunities to win.
See, I don't think that Curry all of a sudden is going to go back to scoring 25 or 30 a game. What I think is that Jimmy Butler is going to play easier basketball. I think teams are still going to double Steph. I think teams are still going to try and take the ball out of his hand. But now you have a player...
Well, not to this degree. This is getting preposterous.
Well, but again, you remember back in, I think it was 2018, Ty Lue talked about in that finals, or those two finals they played against each other, what was the game plan? It wasn't to double Durant. It was to double Curry. Because if you can stop him, Durant can get his. I think teams are still going to throw the kitchen sink at Steph Curry. But now you finally have a player that can take advantage of that, I think with more consistency than an Andrew Wiggins or whoever else you like offensively. And that's Jimmy Butler. So I'm excited to see what Jimmy can do with the attention that I believe is still going to be paid to Steph. But if I'm going to go down the list of the Western Conference teams, are Curry and Jimmy better than Shea and Chet?
No.
Are Curry and Butler better than Ja and Jaren Jackson?
No.
Are they better than Jokic and Murray?
Well, Murray hasn't been very good, but Jokic has been so amazing. So I'm going to give the nod to Denver just because Jokic is incredible.
Are they better than Kyrie and AD?
No.
Are they better than the other teams? Durant and Booker, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so I agree, and I think that those teams, that's to me where they've leapfrogged a couple of these squads. They now have a pair, a tandem that you could legitimately think about being better. I don't know if they're better than Harden and Kawhi. Kawhi's always hurt, so I think they're better than the Kings duo now. I think they're better than. Are they better than LeBron and Luka? Probably not. Are they better than Minnesota? What they got? I don't know. I think it's still going to be an uphill battle.
But that's so difficult to handicap because
I know
who the hell knows how this is going to look, right?
Well, we're going to find out tonight.
I'm excited. And I think that at the end of the day, it's must-watch TV again. I mean, this thing has just been a dog for so long. Woof.
Well, they just got one. Oh, yeah. Throw that back at me. Woof. Yeah, they just got a dog. His name's Jimmy Butler.
It's just been hard to watch, man. It's been boring. Well, even if you're bad, I like young teams that are... Sometimes I'll watch bad NBA basketball teams that are young, just simply because San Antonio was terrible in the beginning of the season. But when you can see young stars that have potential, and you know that everybody knows that they're not very good, watching young players make their way in the NBA, then have a bright future is one thing. Watching a Golden State Warrior team that has been this sort of imbalance, lack of an identity, old, young, no personality, not very good, can't score. It's just unbearable at times.
Well, is Jimmy Butler going to be the difference between Buddy Hield making an open three and not?
Oh, I'm so done with Giovanni.
Well, he's going to be starting because you got one less shooter in the lineup now. I think.
What do you mean he's going to be starting?
Buddy Hield's got to start.
Who's it? You're not sliding Butler to 2?
No. It's I can almost. I can't guarantee you. What I think is going to happen, it's going to be Curry, Hield, Butler, Green, and then Poster to Lewis.
Well, what about when Kuminga comes back?
Kuminga's going to be on the bench.
Wow.
You don't have enough shooting.
I'm trying to think of options, and now that, that
you don't
that
have enough shooting. I mean, maybe post allows you to play Kuminga and Butler together.
You got to stop with the post.
Dude, I'm trying to be creative as all heck here. I mean, imagination, let it run wild.
Post could be a starter.
He is. He is starting for them. I think he's going to start tonight. Let's go out to Pleasanton. He's got Kev. He's got the solution for all of this to work for the Warriors. Kevin, what's up, my man? Good morning.
What's up, guys? This is Kev, the real new edition. I'm the one that called in, you guys, talking about the Warriors look like the new edition, the old school new edition that's doing a residency in Las Vegas. And I said, which one do you think is Draymond Green? And the guy said Bobby Brown is Draymond. Sometimes he's on, sometimes he's off. But look, so how does this sound? You got Devin Vassell, Stephen Castle, Scotty Barnes, Jacob Pioti, 7-footer, 29 years old. You got Bogdanovich, Dyson Daniels, Cam Whitmore. Those are guys that all are available for the Warriors to have done something with. And unfortunately, they didn't do anything. They got Jimmy because they got a name brand guy, but that's not going to make it exciting. It's not going to be a winning philosophy. And unfortunately, with Steve, he's going to run that system. And if you guys recall, when KD came on, it took KD like 3 months. About 2 months and a half to adjust to that. We only have 30 games left. And it's going to be an adjustment. I heard Kerr say, well, he's going to play through, he's going to let the ball be played through Butler when Steph's not in. If Steve doesn't change up, it's going to be a dreadful, and I hate to say it, guys, a dreadful remaining 31 games and horrific next year. It'll be good once Steve leaves because his contract is over at the end of next year. And quite frankly, at the end of next year, once Steve Kerr leaves, then the Warriors will be a much better team.
Okay,
but,
sounds good, Kev. Appreciate it. Yeah, I don't know if there was, pardon me, much of a solution in there. Let's finish up with DC. Huh?
Where'd Dyson Daniels go?
He's with the Hawks. He's one of the best on-ball defenders.
No, I know, but he didn't go anywhere in the trade deadline.
No. He's saying these are players they missed out on, like in the draft.
How did they? Oh,
yeah, they didn't draft him and stuff like that. D's in DC. What's up, man? What's going on?
What's going on, brother Evan Giddings? What's going on, Dan?
What up, D?
Yo.
Yeah, I can't complain, man. I can't complain. Hey, listen, man. I'm just calling to let you know. Number one, my Saturday wouldn't be a good Saturday without you guys, man. Y'all complete my day, man. Y'all complete my day.
Thanks.
But anyways, just to voice my opinion on that new trade that we just did, man. I don't know how to feel about the new acquisition. This dude is a malcontent wherever he's gone. Yes, he starts well but always finishes improperly, to say the least. He always want to fight with ownership or fight with the front office, et cetera, et cetera. We already have a coconut in the doggone roster named Draymond Green. He's the GM, the coach, the whatever you want to call him. Yeah, can you imagine what the relation is going to be between those two in our locker room? Man, I just can't fathom it, man. So I don't know, bro. I don't think it's a good deal. I don't think it's a good pairing. And I'm going to keep an open mind, but I hope it works out, man. But I think it's a mistake it was a mistake to trade for Jimmy Butler. That's my view.
Thanks, D. Appreciate the call. Hope all's well in DC. Yay! Look,
it's got WWE written all over it. That's a Vince McMahon dream matchup, cage matchup.
Well, I think you said it perfectly earlier. It's like they are going to be must watch. That's something they weren't before. It's when they're on national television or on NBC Sports Bay Area or listening on 95.7 The Game, like. You're going to want to know what Jimmy Butler does. You're going to want to know what the Warriors are doing. And I got friends that have been in and out lately. They ain't really watching the Warriors much. They follow the team, but at the very least, they're going to be entertaining. I think that we can say.
You hope, because the worst case scenario is that after a couple of weeks, nothing to see here.
Well, to D's point, though, it's like either it's going to work or it's going to bust.
It's feast or famine.
I think so.
This thing is... They may have just napalmed this thing, man. This thing could get really bad, especially with the contract. Like, this could be one of those huge mistakes.
You got him for 2 more years. And
I'm
you got Steph, Draymond, and Jimmy at $150 million. I don't know. I think they win tonight in Chicago. But we'll see.
Thursday night.
What do you mean? Oh, that's right.
Go lay out my clothes tonight.
By the way, yeah, you and me, we're going out next week. You looking forward to Buddy Hield in the 3-point contest?
That dude is just... I can't even watch him anymore.
Draymond Green.
He's gone from this guy that was so fun the first couple of weeks. Now it's just like... And he's sloppy defensively. This is like... I'm so out on his game, man.
You know, like Chavano? I thought you were in on him.
No, I'm done with that.
What about Draymond and Moses Moody in the skills competition?
I like that. I think the All-Star game is going to be fun this year. By the way, who the hell's going to call it? Because you got like 4 games. Oh, don't do that now. Oh, you know, we didn't get into. I really wanted to talk about the media's coverage of the Luka Doncic trade. Maybe we can do that next week.
Do you have a quick thought? We got a couple minutes.
This is a little involved.
Okay, I got you. No, we can get into that. I thought it was actually. I think Ethan Sherwood-Strauss wrote an article about it, about the way that trades in general are covered and how the media can be protective just because of their relationships with some of these guys. I don't know. I thought it was interesting, but that'll do it for us here on Warriors This Week. A big thank you to Steven Risotto producing this bad boy for us. Big thank you to everybody who called in, chimed in, texted in our YouTube chat powered by First NorCal Credit Union. For Dan Devone, my name is Evan Giddings saying so long. Tap in, 5 o'clock. Warriors play the Chicago Bulls at United Center. Tim Roy's going to be on the call. Mark Grand is going to have pre and post for you all here at 95.7. The game starting at 4 o'clock before the 5 o'clock tip. Jimmy Butler, the era begins tonight. We'll talk to you next week, same time, same place, on your home for Warriors basketball, 95.7 The Game.
And Devon.
Safety on the roads and freeways starts at Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Your 15-minute drive through.